Hi, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting of the Urbana City Council to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu?
Here.
Mr. Sachs?
Here.
Ms. Hersey?
Here.
Mr. Brown?
Here.
Mr. Roberts?
Here.
Mr. Colebrook?
Here.
Mr. Miller? Mayor Marlin?
Here.
Miller is here.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is approval of minutes. They are not ready for tonight's meeting, so they'll be presented next week at the Committee of the Whole. Next item on the agenda is presentations and public input. We don't have any presentations scheduled for tonight, so we'll move on to public input. First up is Mary Pat McGuire.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thanks for having me on this evening, pardon me. This is Mary Pat McGuire. I live and own 804 West Nevada Street, which is 1 block to the south from the site that's under discussion this evening regarding the PUD proposal. I'm also on the design review board and was part of the review process during the January 14th meeting. Just so the public knows, I've written to City Council directly that I'm not in favor of this project as it's currently configured. I have voiced my concerns about the overall scale, the layout, and the design compliance of the project that is not compatible with the neighborhood nor the zoning ordinance and guidelines here. We've all been through the statistics on this project that the applicant is requesting a 50% increase in the FAR, and in exchange is adding large footprints, is endangering beautiful mature canopy trees on the project, and is adding 25% more imperviousness to the site. And yet the proposal adds no net occupational density to the site, which is ironic. But on top of those statistics, the applicant won't adhere to the corridor design guidelines on top of that. It was extremely alarming to hear the architect express during last week's meeting that the developer wants what he wants. They're not willing to meet the context or guidelines of our neighborhood. We are a multicultural neighborhood. We are a multi-generational neighborhood. From Paul DeBevick and Liz Cardman on California, to Betty Anderson on Oregon, to the young people who live on our 800 block of Nevada, we want more compatible design here. This project is not proposed as part of our neighborhood. It is a complete violation of our corridor. It is not diverse, and it's not appropriate to this place. It's exasperating to hear people who don't live here tell us what should be here, and who ignore the corridor compatibility rules and the guidelines that we all live with here. We are a neighborhood, and I'm sure you can understand that, and I hope that you will uphold that tonight. A better approach would be to restore good buildings, of which we know some of the buildings on this site are good houses, and was even mentioned in the staff memo during the November Plan Commission meeting that there are several houses built between 1900 to 1930, which will be forever lost from this neighborhood if this project goes through. A better approach would be to identify the truly dilapidated structures on the property, like the Axiom building on the southwest corner, and to do infill development with much more creative and unique buildings that help to distinguish this historic and valuable front door of Urbana to the university. A better approach would be to incorporate all public input to the process as well. The city has not once connected with the community to work with who lives here and who currently invests here to say, hey, we care about you. What do you think? Even with public input on this project, it seems to be repeatedly ignored. Please listen to the community's concerns this evening. If this project is approved to demolish 2/3 of the city block, it will devalue the corridor and our properties. It has already contributed again to a massive erosion of trust of this community to the city. If you vote no and uphold the compatibility issues and the corridor guidelines, then there is a chance to do something better here. The city, the developer, and a design team and the community have a chance then to work together to think about all of the value added that redevelopment should have here. I ask you to consider the assets that are here, the future of the corridor, and the community that is here today. Please vote no tonight. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Next up, Lois Steinberg.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Beautiful houses once existed right up to the quad. Every 20 years, the university took a block. Now the destruction of housing continues with so-called development on the east side of Lincoln, where it should have stopped. The comprehensive plan came about after the Campus Oak Apartments behemoth was built on Green Street, minus the Oaks that used to live there. But what has happened since? The city council has failed us. The Woona neighborhood is not going to be a neighborhood. This PUD is not for the betterment of Woona. The developers have been pushing out the residents, renters of Woona. The landlords never face consequences for allowing the housing to fall into disrepair. Where does the money go from the rental registration program? Could it be allocated to invest in and repurpose older housing as promised in Mayor Marlin's 2018-2021 priorities? Was there ever a working group developed for this promise? Can the city buy all the houses on this PUD and sell it for $1 to individuals on contract to rehab and flip or live in, maybe giving 10% of the profit back? What happened to the research on potential zoning tools to encourage reuse of older housing stock? Was it ever researched? What happened to rehab grants? What happened to the proposal for developing funding sources for distressed properties in Blight and Woona? Love and stewardship are what these houses need. The rejection by student renters of this older housing stock is due to the glut of new structures and the neglect of the houses. Is the city in cahoots with the rental landlords who milk the property, making it unlivable? We live here because we love Woona. The neighborliness of the residents and renters, the charm, character is not everyone's taste, but the butt ugliness of this PUD behemoth does not belong here. The unapproved siding cladding is only going to last 30 years, becoming more than butt ugly. Is it fair to see dollar signs for the city coffers off the backs of Woona homeowners, good landlords and renters? I looked at the houses on this PUD. They are really good buildings. Okay, the garages need to be torn down, but they are better than other so-called teardowns that have been rehabbed. There will be a domino effect of homeowners leaving the immediate area if this project goes through. And with rental property of this sort dominating the corridor, we will see a continued erosion of the blocks east, faster than every 20 years, one day reaching race. This PUD process has not been transparent, it is flawed, and has not followed standard protocol. Voting yes will be a violation of the Urbana zoning ordinance. Woona has been powerless. Power to Woona. Vote no on this PUD. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Next up is Liz Cardman.
Hi, good evening. I'm Liz Cardman of Urbana, speaking tonight for 101 people who signed a petition in short order requesting that City Council vote no on ordinance number 2020-12-070. Most are from West Urbana, but not exclusively. The petition elaborates, the aggregation of 10 parcels for one mega complex would be detrimental to the surrounding area because it is incompatible with the adjoining R2 neighborhood. The scale of the proposed development, its materials, and its designs are inconsistent with the goals, objectives, and future land uses of the Urbana Comprehensive Plan and the Lincoln-Busey Corridor Guidelines. With apologies for any mispronunciation, for the record, I read the signatories. C.K. Gonzalez, Christine Yerkes, Michael Walker, Lois Steinberg, Nancy Goodall, Ann H. Silvis, Tony Allegretti, Beverly Ralphus, Leslie Sherman, Paul Hickson, Lori Reitzman, Rebecca Mead, Tim Stelzer, Sarah Stelzer, Daniel Stelzer, Andrew Stelzer, Ellie Putnam, Deanna Liao, Tamara Chaplin, Anton Chaplin, Catherine Tesson, Stephanie Neffens, Mary E. Yeomans, Leonard McCullough, Michael J. Ploa, Elizabeth D. Ploa, Victor and Bobby Fine, Carl Nelson, Samuel N. Beschers, Tacey Miller, Dee Dee Karen Brown, Judith and Derek Robinson, Ann Weimer, Barbara Salisbury, Lillian J. Levant, Carolyn and Norman Baxley, Sally Shepard, Cope Cumpston, Mary Beth Allen, Joan Stoltz and Norman Millian, S. Nixon, Daniel McDonough, Bob and Ann Berger, Sarah McAvoy, Hussein Shahid Tolu, Peggy Patton, Jennifer Hines, Todd Kinney, Lisa Truel, M. Elizabeth Gunther, Johannes S. Frazier, Rick Nelson, Eunice Weech, Bruce Schatz, Nathan C. Sonnenschein, Karen L. Fresco, Laura Haber, Robin Fellers, Ryan Fellers, Kevin Price, Zachary R. Putnam, Janelle Weaver, Esther Pat, Eric Larson, Laura O'Donnell, Dallas R. Trinkle, Patricia Cardenas, Deborah Katz Downey, Beverly Fagan, John D. Polk, Andrew Elaine, Thomas Rockfus, Deborah Allen, Howard Shine, Ruth Ween, Tom Seals, Tiffany Bowie, Matt Freund, Betty Anderson, Corby Rossett, Rachel Rossett, Mary Lee Milton, Jack Ritter, Kara McKim, Andrew Orta, Ingrid Malif, Daniel Newman, Audrey Ishii, Josephine Kibbe, Douglas Kibbe, Rob McCullough, Marie-Pierre Lesiva Moulin, Juan Alvarez, Mary Pat McGuire, PLA, and lastly, Paul T. DeBevick and Elizabeth R. Cardin. 101 people say no to a mega complex which occupies more than 2/3 of a city block, setting an unacceptable precedent for the entire Lincoln-Busey corridor and threatening to destabilize a long-standing neighborhood. 101 people say no to a mega complex which has an FAR that is 50% more than what is allowable by right. 101 people say no to bulldozing 10 historic houses and duplexes for one mega complex. I speak only for myself when I say I'm outraged to think of picking up my newspapers at the curb every morning and seeing this mega complex looming less than 1 block away from my R2 zoned home. This project is overwhelmingly incompatible with the adjoining R2 neighborhood. 101 people ask you to vote no on ordinance number 2020-12-07. And I thank you for your time and patience.
Thank you. Next up is Tamara Chaplin.
Good evening, this is Tamara. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. First, let me just thank those who have spoken before me for their very eloquent arguments against this incredibly misguided project. I'm a homeowner at 209 West California. I'm also one of the signatories on that petition that was just read out. My home, which some of you may know, was in a state of incredible disrepair when I purchased it in 2009 and won a PACA award after I renovated it in 2010. I think that many of us know that California is one of those streets that's kind of a border street that takes us out of the more beautiful part of Wuna and moves us towards parts that actually need more of this kind of infusion of money and care. In all of the renovation that I did on my home and on an addition that I then added in the back, I was kept to extremely strict guidelines by the city of Urbana. Like my neighbors, I am outraged by the notion that you would pass and approve of this project. As so many have already said, it takes up 70% of the block. It is 50% greater than FAR zoning permits permit for the same occupancy rate. We have an incredibly beautiful neighborhood. It's the reason that I moved here. I work at the university. I chose to come to Wuna because of its character, its trees. This project is not compatible with the Lincoln Corridor or with the West Urbana neighborhood. And while I can understand the fact that it takes a tremendous amount of investment to renovate good buildings, I would second, or renovate buildings that need it, I would second what Lois has said, which is that we need to also find ways to keep landlords to account on the buildings that they're letting to fall into disrepair, which then puts us in this position where we feel like there's no other way except to basically sell out and let people bulldoze. So I'm going to cede the floor to whoever comes next, but just register my objection to this proposal. And to state as well that I understand, the financial circumstances here. If the design and the design and the conditions of the entire project were entirely different, I don't think we would be having the same conversation. Although I too am very much in favor of renovating the buildings that we have, I do understand that sometimes it's better to take something down and put something new up in its place, but not something like this. So please vote no on this project. Thank you.
Okay. Next up is Leslie Sherman.
Hi, my name is Leslie Sherman. I'm also a signatory on the petition that was mentioned. I live at 513 West Oregon Street, which is 2 blocks from this proposed development. So as a close neighbor, I am highly impacted by this. A couple of things that have been mentioned that are especially alarming for me as a neighbor on this street is the increase of 25% of impervious surfaces that will be added to that will tax our drain system. The system within Urbana or West Urbana is definitely on the older side. We see flooding regularly at the base on Kohler, at the base, at the bottom of the hill from where this development will be done. And the idea of adding more impervious surfaces to that is very alarming for my neighbors that are down street from me. And also for me to have to deal with that and how that will impact my house. Now, I am in favor of development within WUNA. I want to say that straight off. And just like the previous speaker, I'm in favor of development, but I feel like that development purchases land, just like myself as a homeowner within WUNA, West Urbana, is that I purchased this house understanding how it was zoned. And so you purchase a piece of property understanding how it's zoned. And one of the things that I feel over and over again is we're having developers purchase land, and then they decide to try to find ways to not support the zoning that's been applied to that land. The comprehensive plan, which to me is an agreement, it's a contract. My neighborhood was very active. The neighbors, the members, the citizens of West Urbana were very active in creation of the comprehensive plan. I understand that it's being renovated, but there is one already that's in place that is the one that this development needs to follow. And that comprehensive plan is a contract with this neighborhood that you will help, that the city and this council will help to support. And by the way, also the committees like the Planning Commission will use this as a guideline. Well, it's a contract such that you should be following it. And so, if we've made this agreement, we are assuming that you're going to stick to it. And to stick to it, you need to deny this PUD. Okay, they are asking, if people are, it's really setting a precedence. I'm really concerned about that. People have more eloquently explained that. But I'm really concerned about the precedent that will happen. And then suddenly on the Lincoln corridor, every single block will be like this. And that will greatly impact the encroachment of similar developments that will be right up at my doorstep. And to me, part of that contract of the comprehensive plan is your agreement to protect not just the character of the neighborhood, but also my property values. So when you allow such a development to be there where it's not appropriately zoned, to me that says you do not respect me or my property values. And I hope that your vote tonight will show that you actually do. Also, I want to highlight that I attended the Planning Commission meetings, or at least one of them, at the beginning of this project. And I was quite alarmed by how little, even at that time, there was a lot of neighborhood feedback against this project, and yet the Planning Commission completely ignored it, and it seemed to be the belief that any development is good development. And I want to highlight, any development is not good development, and we shouldn't just kowtow to developers for any sort of revenue increase. And I really hope that you will vote against this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Tina Gonzalez.
How about now? I'm unmuted.
Yes.
I'm C.K. Gonzalez. My husband, Michael Walker, and I live at 511 West High Street in Urbana. We ask you to vote no on this planned unit development and on this case. We have owned and rehabilitated 3 properties in this neighborhood. We were active in the development of the comprehensive plan. We were active in the development of the Lincoln-Busey corridor development regulations. We have participated in rehabilitating other portions of this neighborhood. We believed in the process at the city of Urbana. We participated in as citizens. I served on the Plan Commission for a long time. I served on the City Council. I understand the benefit of broadening the tax base. At the same time, this neighborhood is an extraordinary asset to the city of Urbana. It's a livable, walkable, historic neighborhood near the downtown. It brings people to the downtown. It supports a neighborhood school, and it addresses the character and has been preserved for a long time because the neighbors who are all turning out in force one more time care about it. The neighbors are owners, the neighbors are renters, the neighbors are people who want to live in this kind of vibrant neighborhood with some architectural character. Part of the problem with this proposal is how many waivers it seeks. It doesn't comply with the underlying zoning regulations. It doesn't comply with the Lincoln-Busey corridor regulations. When you get to a place where the developer is seeking a waiver for 50% of existing regulations, that's a problem. We ask you, as people who own property here, who live in this neighborhood, who care about the city of Urbana, please turn this down. Ask people, tell them that the published regulations are the published regulations. Ask them to comply with them. There's a reason we have waivers. There's lots of historical, strange things in our lot lines in a neighborhood this old. That doesn't support a 50% waiver of the floor area ratio. It doesn't support not complying with the design regulations. And we ask you, please hold them to the regulations that we are held to, and please respect the historic character of this neighborhood. Thank you for listening to us. Please vote no.
Thank you. Next up is Meg McDonald.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Dear City Council, my name is Meg McDonald. I live and work in Ward 5. My pronouns are she, they. I didn't really have anything to comment on today's agenda. I did want to check in about a couple of issues, but now that I've heard all these people from WUNA speak up, it's kind of bringing back a flashback to one of my first City Council meetings in 2016, trying to save a group of historic houses on Lincoln Avenue. And you all vote, besides Dennis and Aaron Ammons, you all voted against that. So I hope that that doesn't happen tonight. And I wish everybody in WUNA good luck with that. Another issue, the COVID grant money, what have we spent it on? Testing for county employees is what I understand so far. Is that it? We didn't give any of that COVID grant money to the police for that $10,000 in riot gear they were seeking, right? Just want to double check. We could use grant money, the COVID grant money, to increase grocery store worker wages for a certain amount of time. They've passed similar ordinances in other towns. They've called it hero pay. I commented the link to an example when the city's Facebook was being used to promote the mayor's supermarket employee holiday right before the primary election. We as Urbana residents should be innovative and compassionate with that COVID grant money, looking out for our most vulnerable in our community. Moving on, I am disappointed in the results of the primary election, but I am not surprised or discouraged. I hope you all are humbled and remember that you work for us, not that you all work for the mayor. Only 1,000-something people voted for the mayor in Urbana. Less than 400 people voted in Ward 5. I received almost 30% of that vote. And that's over 115 people voting for defunding the police. The mayor said in July that she was all for reallocating funds away from the police. almost a year later now. So when I come in here peeved and pointing out what is lacking, do not interrupt, dismiss, or discredit me. I am speaking up for a lot of young people who are too intimidated to be here. I don't speak up because it's fun, because I care, and so do the people who voted for me. People in the township and on this body didn't want me on council, and I guess you got your wish, but don't think that that absolves you from listening to me or people with similar asks, concerns, approaches as me. People are hurting badly, and I hope you realize that you had opponents in your elections because people don't see you caring enough with concrete policy changes or funds shifted. Another thing I'd like to ask is that you are more transparent in general and out there with info about the Emulsicoat in Ward 5. So when is that town hall meeting again? It's like April 6th, that might be wrong. So could the mayor or Dennis post on the Historic East Urbana Facebook page like they were, so people can put that on their calendar? And lastly, promoting any officer that was involved in the Urbana Police Department's abuse and assault of Aaliyah Lewis is disgusting. Is the use of force policy even updated yet, or are we still just passing resolutions? Thanks.
Next up is Christopher Hansen.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. A small list of items here. About a month ago, or I think it was about a month ago, the Urbana City Council approved a new FOIA officer. And at that time, I noted that the city was in violation in terms of posting public notice of its FOIA officer. The state law does require you to post on the city website and at your physical locations, such as the vestibule at the city building, the identity of the FOIA officer. So now I'm bringing this up a second time. The city hasn't done this properly, I don't think, since probably June of last year. So right now the website says that the city clerk is the FOIA officer, and that hasn't been right for a long time. So I'm just asking you again to comply with state law. Just post the identity of the FOIA officer. That way requesters know who that person is. You need to post it on your website. You need to post it at your physical location. I have a question about the city attorney appointment tonight. I'm wondering why the city didn't appear to have gone through a selection process. Maybe you did, it just wasn't very publicly noticeable. But last time you hired a city attorney, you interviewed a number of people. This time it just seems to be a quick appointment. And my other question there is, right now, James Simon, the city attorney, serves as the city ethics officer. The city of Urbana does have an ethics ordinance that a lot of people don't know about. And my question is this new guy going to be the city ethics officer as well, or is that going to be appointed to someone else? I think James Simon is leaving, in a week, or maybe already has left. So I think that appointment needs to be made. Speaking of ethics officer, I'm wondering if any action is going to be taken on the city clerk's use of public property to make her campaign video. That is a violation of state law and a violation of Urbana's ethics ordinance. So I know we don't usually hold anyone accountable in Urbana, but here's a very clear-cut situation where someone has violated a number of both statute and ordinance, and our ethics ordinance would seem to apply. And tonight you're going to be discussing a partial removal of the city from its own human rights ordinance. And so I wonder if this serves as yet another case, another example of where the city is going to fail to hold itself accountable. And then the next thing I wanted to mention was the appointment of, I guess he's a Sergeant Coker now, but he's going to be a lieutenant. I'm wondering how that happens in the city, what mechanism happens. Is it something that happens between the mayor and the police chief to make that decision? I don't think that's a good choice. And I also wonder what we need to do to see a more diverse command staff in our police department. I don't think anyone would look at our group of lieutenants, deputy chief, and chief and call that group what people might call diverse. So I'm wondering what we need to fix that. And those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Audrey Ishii.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. As I said at City Council 2 weeks ago, Christopher Hansen and the Edgar County Watchdogs have an expensive lawsuit against Urbana. So I got curious and I looked at Hansen's website, his blogs that post taxpayer finance freedom of information requests known as FOIAs to imitate real journalism. In addition to maliciously describing the city and everyone in it as unlawful, illegal, and criminal, he violates privacy norms such as posting the mortgage of a city employee. He even violates his own privacy, posting up FOIAs covering his own complaints. So I ordered those FOIAs and I found 2 911 calls of May and October 2019 for what he alleged were attempted bicycle thefts. In neither case had he actually lost a bicycle. In the first case, 2 black boys simply passed from the alley to the street on a paved driveway, and yet he called 911 and chased them from Illinois Street, down Broadway, past Black Dog to the 25 o'clock, where he forcibly, against their will, stuck his cell phone in their faces. In defense against this obvious Karen-style vigilante, one photographed him. During this ordeal, he called 911 more than once and refused Metcad instructions to stand still, continuing to chase. When the police finally found him, he claimed attempted bike theft, criminal trespass, and battery for knocking the phone he was sticking in their face after they clearly told him to stop. He wanted those boys arrested based on his say-so. Well, let's just look at how much Hansen's say-so is really worth. After I spoke last week, Hansen got to respond immediately. He stated, "I did not call 911 for those situations. I understand the police are trying to smear me." Metcad reports that he called 911 at 2:11 p.m. and again at 2:23, refusing Metcad instructions to stop and pull over. At 2:29, he alleged he was battered by a boy, and he continued to chase until the police found him at 2:31. Reading this police report, it took a while for my own white privilege to sink in. Because if my sons were stalked around town by a muscular man who summons the police for cutting through his property that isn't even posted as private and photographed repeatedly against their explicit will, he would have been served with a lawsuit the very next day, and he wouldn't be doing that to anyone else's children. Vigilantism has no place in Urbana. Finally, in response to the publicly available counts of police complaints and FOIAs, Hansen stated that, "I don't know where all those numbers are coming from." 2 days later, in front of the Civilian Police Review Board, he told them that his identity was leaked by them or city staff, saying, "That's the real deal. That's what happened." His voice cracked with hurt and betrayal, and the board seemed to swallow this fiction, taking 20 minutes to discuss who could have leaked this information that he knew had been posted on his own website. Calling Hansen a journalist for blogging the stories he creates is like calling an arsonist a volunteer fireman for putting out the fires he starts, except that Hansen is not putting out his fires, he's charging us for them. Urbana police did not arrest Hansen in May for making a false report or chasing children. They de-escalated him instead. They warned him what the boy said about his reputation. In October, they made it clear his bike wasn't locked. They didn't say it, but it was obviously a bait bike. Hansen then went from being a predator that stalks children to one that stalks the police as well. He has stuck himself in every possible police interaction so he can FOIA reports and body cam. He records police traffic from his houses on Illinois Street, so they have to write up a report on the officer that did 37 instead of 30. And then he appealed the 60 of 81 complaints in which he thinks he comes off as reasonable for hearings before the Civilian Police Review Board. We all have better uses for our civic time and money than feeding one man's sad power trip. We know who and what he is. Let's move on now, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Alan Max Axelrod.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All righty. So I'm going to start off with Black Lives Matter. This is going to come up quite a few times during the public comments. Firstly, in response to the previous speaker, Audrey, who did not listen to the November 2020 listening session remarks by Chris Hansen, who basically swore off helping the police in the ways that he understood it. It seems like this is cancel culture. And that someone with white privilege should take the time to understand what is meaningful accountability, and what is she doing? Now, that said, I also have some additional things I want to say to the folks who are speaking out against this rental development. That one, in solidarity with you, I'm sorry I didn't see the petition. Please count me as a supporter in that effort. I do want to make some brief class analysis here, which is to say that the income in the area that is being described is significantly higher than the income in, say, Lincoln and University, where there was quite a few housing units demolished as part of a sale of recategorized properties that then resulted in the development of townhomes. Now, I think both of these redevelopment efforts should not happen or should not have happened. But I also want to say that I have a belief or a bias that because there are wealthier people and more importantly, homeowners who are speaking up, that they are going to be successful. And when 1/3 of Black community members nationwide are homeowners as compared to 2/3 of white community members, seems like a systemic race issue. So I just want to say, City Council, please do not pass 2020-1207, pretty much exactly as the folks here are demanding, but also keep that in mind for future developments, because the historically Black areas of Urbana are becoming more white. They're no longer majority Black for one particular census tract. There's no longer life expectancy data there because it's so populated with college students per capita that it risks identifying individual deaths in the community, which is against the CDC privacy guidelines, which is why that data is no longer available. How can we say Black Lives Matter if we don't fight for Black housing, if we don't fight for Black community developments, keeping their character? I also wanted to ask the City Council who it was that gave them the idea that water shutoffs ever stopped. Now, we had a back and forth over the last month where the City Council at first thought that water shutoffs had stopped. Then the city manager looked into it and honestly said that they had not. Who gave you all that idea? That wasn't in the Illinois Commerce Commission press releases. And, you know, we'll find out, but it'd be better to hear from you. I also wanted to say, despite all the state press releases, despite all the local press releases, despite the canvassing, despite the distribution of mailers to sign up for the low-income home energy assistance program, our LIHEAP season during this pandemic started 2 months early. It ends at the end of April. Despite all of this, almost 100,000 less, more like about 50 to 80,000 actually, less people have signed up for LIHEAP. If shutoffs resume, this is going to be a devastating thing. Have a good night.
Thank you. Next up is Tracy Chong.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hi, I'm Tracy Chong. I live in the Wuna neighborhood where the PUD is being discussed. I have also been kind of upset about city council meetings for more than a year, speaking every week. But I will try to speak calmly and speak calmer than the wife of the disgruntled ex-FOIA officer that got Urbana into the lawsuit that you guys lost. So last city council meeting was interesting. You guys refused to talk about issues that actually matter, like how government officials, city staff, and the police department can be held accountable, hold itself to standards the city hold others to, or how the city can operate more transparently. Instead, you spend more than 2 hours finding every reason to not support a well-thought-out development plan for the PUD request. The discussion could not have gone more ridiculous when some council members started nitpicking on the color and shape of stones as a reason for not supporting the PUD, because that's what the neighborhood wants. I don't know, seems to me like you guys are really overcompensating and trying to show that council can spend time discussing important issues when you actually don't discuss the important issues. Let's be clear about what we've been asking for more than a year. We want you to have the same level of engagement, talking about policing, transparency, accountability, writing what was wrongly done to Aaliyah Lewis, the taser misconduct incident that no one wants to discuss, and so on. Not the color of some walls. Let's be even clearer. The neighborhood that you are referring to is just a small handful of residents, like Council Member Eric Sachs, whose only concern is that the property values will be affected. This same small group that wants to maintain the status quo of Una and are against any form of development that would bring in more diversity. 101 people out of 10 to 20,000 residents in the neighborhood is not the neighborhood. Thank goodness for sane voices like Councilmember Colebrook, and the developer's representative who showed the actual condition of the houses. They also gave very reasonable explanations for the waivers and zoning ask that has been brought up. Some people are going to say, oh, everything can be restored. But please consider the real world feasibility and economics of this, and not in the fantasy world of privileged NIMBYs who are trying to represent themselves as the neighborhood. Some might say that you should sell the house for $1. Where's the rest of the $150,000 to restore the house coming from? I'm also the neighborhood. I'm also part of Una, and I urge you to vote yes. The next point is Sergeant Coker really getting a promotion after all that he has done in the past year? Taking part in the beating of an innocent woman, exhibiting sexist behavior, assaulting a woman because she's not acting like a lady? Sergeant Coker also stopped and handcuffed a civilian who in no way matched a suspect's description, except that he was Black. Sergeant Coker has also been documented to show disdain for members of the public that are exercising their right to observe the police. This kind of attitude towards civilians who feel responsible for police oversight is unacceptable when interactions with the police officers can rapidly escalate into assault and even death. Sergeant Coker has not been held accountable for his actions. At this point, I have no hope that police officers who beat Aaliyah Lewis would be held accountable for their actions. The very least you can do is not approve his promotion. If you do, think of the message you are sending to other UPD police officers and the public. Finally, if the city is serious about increasing diversity and promoting equity, having 5 middle-aged white men at the top of the UPD command staff is as far backwards as you can go in terms of diversity. Thank you.
Next up is Colin Dodson.
Hi, yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very much. I haven't made a point of properly introducing myself before, so that's how I want to start tonight. My name is Colin Dodson. My pronouns are they, them. I am not Mr. Dodson. Please refer to me as Colin or Colin Dodson. I'm also running for City Council in Ward 2 and look forward to the opportunity to serve the residents of my ward and Urbana as a whole. Speaking to the comments about the PUD, I do want to emphasize one point that came up. Speaking as a renter in Ward 2, I would like to say, yes, let's please hold landlords accountable, more so than we currently are. The two things I really want to talk about, first, I do want to say thank you to the council for taking the HRO back to committee. And I really do appreciate many of the changes that have been made. If I might make a further suggestion, it may help to ensure that the requirements of the Human Rights Ordinance are also matched up one for one with code of conduct for all city employees and elected officials, and that these documents are made public so that the residents of Urbana can at least help to some extent to hold officials accountable. Second, I want to echo the points. James Corey Coker should not be promoted to lieutenant, especially considering his involvement in the cases already mentioned. And again, this stands directly against the city's commitments to challenging white supremacy and ending structural racism. and honestly will impede any material movement towards implementing adequate de-escalation policies when leadership in the police department are very clearly extremely likely to be uncooperative in that aim, seeing as they've cases like this where they have not de-escalated. Thank you very much for your time. Have a good night.
Thank you. Next up is Marie-Pierre Olasiva Moulin.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, so I didn't prepare for this meeting, so my statement will be quite short. I am a signatory on the petition to vote no for this PUD 2020-12070. I live on the 800 West Nevada block. I am a homeowner, and for a lady who spoke earlier, I am a Black woman. And we trusted the city zoning rules, and that's why we bought our house many years ago. And like previous speakers who spoke before me, I'm not going to restate the reasons they've stated to vote against this PUD. But this project has a 50% FAR greater in capacity than what is allowed in R2 zoning. And I feel that there is a cynical flavor. People talk about diversity. They want more people. They want more money, I guess. But we are not against business development. We are against the ugliness of what this PUD is proposing for our neighborhood. Don't think 1 second that when you are a minority, and I don't consider this word badly, even though I think there is a bad connotation behind it, that we want to live in places where it will destroy our neighborhood. 101 people say no, and that group of people is well diverse. It is not by your race, by your ethnicity, it is by the way you think. And I think this is something that people should consider. And also someone said that if we had this building in the neighborhood, it will decrease our property values. And I definitely agree with that. So please vote no, and thank you.
Thank you. Next up is phone number ending in 207. Can you unmute?
Hello, Karen James?
Yes.
Okay. So I would actually like to give a well-deserved promotion, and one that has been in the works since Corey Coker started with the force. I have lived in Urbana and been a property owner for 23 years. I'm not sure how many years Corey had been on the force when I moved here, but I am sure a few more than I have known him. He had worked at the middle school when I had 2 of my 3 children there. I am thankful for the time and felt safe for my children to be there. He was also there both times I needed a calming force to guide me through a situation in the middle school setting. He was also there Friday night footballs when my oldest son played varsity for Urbana High School. I would see him on the grounds making sure everyone was safe to enjoy the game, and maybe a time or two to stop at concessions for some popcorn or soda, maybe. My family lives a block from the police department. Often he would stop by just to say, hi, how are you? How are things going? If he saw me and my husband in the front yard, or give us a wave as he drove by. I know he has had his hands in several situations, from drive-by shootings to break-ins. With all of these situations, he's been professional and non-judgmental. So for him to get this promotion is not only a testament to him as a police officer, but as a son, a father, a husband, and is a true brother in blue. Congratulations to your accomplishment and looking forward to more. I would also like to say I'm very sorry for people that have not had a great interaction with Corey. He's a wonderful person. And I also am not a woman of whiteness. I am Hispanic, American Indian, and a Hawaiian. So he is very respectful to all accounts. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Lance Pittman.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I just want to comment on, I oppose the appointment promotion of Sergeant Coker to Lieutenant. The Aaliyah Lewis arrest was on April 10th, 2020. I just want to remind people of the timing of this. This is April 10th, 2020. As we know, the COVID-19 story was ramping up in September, November, December of 2019. We knew it was a foreign story at that point. Failures of the US government meant that we, myself included, didn't understand the nature of the pandemic until 2020. In January, February 2020, high administration officials in the Trump administration were warning Trump that he was risking his reelection if he didn't take this seriously. And then there was the market crash in 2020. Why do I bring this up? Well, let's just measure by the Dow Jones on March 9th, Monday, March 9th, 2020, Black Monday, as they called it, minus 8% on the Dow Jones. Thursday, March 12th, minus 10% on the Dow Jones. Monday, March 16th, minus 13% on the Dow Jones. I don't say this to like deify the Dow Jones in any way. I'm just saying that like there is no way that anyone could have missed this. In 2019, you could have said, I was ignorant. I didn't know that, you know, COVID-19 was in the US. I just watched Fox News or listened to Trump or whatever. And then our highest level administration officials in the national government were covering it up, or at least not helping us to understand what was going on. But by March 2020, everyone knew what was going on. I lost a third of my wealth in that market crash. And I don't say that to like, to get people to empathize with me or anything like that. It's recovered since then. But what I'm saying is that no one could ignore the COVID story by March 2020. When was Aaliyah Lewis arrested? Aaliyah Lewis was arrested on April 10th, 2020, a month later, after this was a national news story that COVID was a thing. It was in the US, it was a pandemic, it was everywhere. And none of the three officers who jumped on Aaliyah Lewis's back with assault rifles, yelling at her, beating her, none of them wore a mask. What is going on? I mean, seriously, like it's one thing if this happened in like January or December or something. This was in April, a month after the crash that was on the front pages of Drudge Report, the front pages of Huffington Post, the front pages of CNN, the front pages of Google News, of Google Finance, of everything. This is how our police department comports itself. They get a third of our budget. A lot of people have, I'm not saying anything new, a lot of people have said this before. There's been a COVID outbreak in the county jail for a year. Our police go around without masks, beating people, putting them in prison for things they didn't do, and contributing to the COVID outbreak. At this point, so I don't even know what to say at this point. A third of the city budget is dedicated to the police. As far as I can tell, this isn't like an elaborate and expensive welfare program for racist bioterrorists. I'll end my comment there. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to address the Urbana City Council? Betty Anderson, did I see a hand up? Yes, okay. Go ahead, Betty. You need to unmute.
Good?
Yes.
Is that better? Okay. So I'm the old lady, the born citizen from this town, and my property is at 713 West Oregon. I am in visible range of this PUD. And I've written several letters. I hired Burns Clancy to illustrate to the city the inadequacy of the sewer and stormwater drainage system in my area. I renovated my house, as did one of the speakers earlier, with enormous number of regulations given to me by the city council at that time. And of course I live at, I'm sorry, I didn't say, 713 West Oregon. And so there's a large tree in my backyard. It's the largest tree in Champaign County, the linden tree. There is also a branch of the boneyard that comes down the middle of Lincoln Avenue under the little troll house next to my house, which is called the Nathan Ricker House. I don't know if you're aware of it, but it's the white Spanish style house that has historic designation now. And it goes catty corner down to the corner of Oregon and Kohler, where the stormwater and sewage systems are inadequate already at this time, as they have been on Busey Avenue by my house, where the stormwater encroaches up to a foot next to my house. So I'm just kind of concerned that, you know, we as citizens pay for taxes to fix up the Urbana High School and preserve that in the junior high school. And we have a comprehensive plan that's not being adhered to. So I'm just wondering why the city council and the planning committee and all the other little committees between November and February somehow in our university setting were unable to allow public comment due to the inadequacy or the failure of the Zoom system in our town to allow public comment, and shove this through in the dark of night. And I just wanted to tell you that there are consequences for the failure of contracts. And my feeling is very, very strong, which is why I fought for the historic designation of the Nathan Ricker House. And as Jenny will fight vigorously for the Huber House, across the street from me, also a Nathan Ricker house. We're going to sit here on our properties till the end of my life, until the end of my children's life, and we're going to keep asking you why you failed to follow the comprehensive plan. If you fail to follow the comprehensive plan and have no reason or interest in following the comprehensive plan, then perhaps you should consider the ending of a comprehensive plan, because if you don't follow it, what's the point? And there you go. I am not appreciative of the fact that any racial bias is coming into here, because we have, those of us in this town have been incredibly supportive. I personally also helped to fight against the property on about a block north of Lincoln, block north of University, becoming a gambling center at the Crossrock, where the children go to school in North Lincoln Avenue. I don't know whoever allowed the retreat to come in or any of those other heinous properties along University. And I am just unhappy that the city council is not gonna listen to us, because we're gonna sit here and we're gonna keep coming back. And you need to understand that, because it's not gonna get better until we get someone to listen to us. And I don't see a lot of really interested people here watching from your side. So good luck with this, and thank you.
Next up is Sarah Nixon.
This is Sarah Nixon. City Council, you have heard from a number of Urbana residents this evening lamenting that their mayor and City Council has failed them. I'm here to add my voice to theirs and to ask you not to fail another Urbana resident. Mayor Marlin is seeking your approval to elevate to the position of lieutenant Urbana Police Sergeant James Corey Coker, who participated in and oversaw the violent beating of an innocent young African-American Urbana resident last April 10th. I know and you know that I speak for a multitude when I say that the Urbana community does not believe that the city has properly handled the brutal attack and unwarranted arrest and prosecution of Miss Lewis, who was never suspected of having committed any crime. She was a 90-pound woman attacked, body slammed, dogpiled by 3 overweight police officers and given a gratuitous punch to the head, knee kick to the ribs, verbal and mental abuse, all of which, as you know, was fully captured on video by civilian bystanders. All of that was overseen by Corey Coker, whom the mayor now brings to you for a promotion. Corey Coker was the most senior supervisor on the scene that day. He oversaw the abuse, where Lewis was ordered to crawl on the ground, and he participated in pinning her down during the beating. And during that same incident, Coker was also has also been criticized for making another Urbana resident, a child this time, lie face down on the pavement while being handcuffed, who besides being Black, in no way matched the reported subject description. Racial profiling at its finest. In yet a different incident documented by local independent investigative journalist Christopher Hansen on checkcu.com, a citizen witness video in East Urbana features the same Corey Coker, who can be heard joking about how he should have told a concerned bystander who apparently was attempting to film him in the performance of his duties, joking that he should, quote, come by the bystander's place of work the next morning and, quote, see what the fuck they're doing, unquote, as retribution for that bystander having tried to observe the police who were detaining young black people on bicycles. Now, City Council, please ask yourselves, why is it that Mayor Marlin is rushing to appoint him even though Urbana already has 3 police lieutenants? Do we really need a 4th one? Why? Did you know that a review of practices among our local law enforcement agencies reveals that it is a commonplace strategy to issue promotions and distinctions to our police officers about whom individuals in the public allege misconduct, very credibly alleged misconduct that is substantiated? Are rank promotions and issuing ceremonial recognitions and awards for valor, for ethics, and so on and so forth a spin maneuver to do damage control for officers who disgrace the badge? It is unutterably re-traumatizing for victims of police misconduct to helplessly endure institutional cover-up and to helplessly witness these officers who abused them rewarded and promoted and held up as exemplary, shining heroes in blue. This re-victimization of watching your abusers glorified is what African-American people have been subjected to since forever. And I can't even imagine how this practice of rewarding and promoting misconduct must taint the UPD's internal culture. How demoralizing it must be for those officers lower on the totem pole who disagree with these corrupt practices. City Council, Corey Coker, and the mayor are counting on your compliance, on your willingness to submissively go along with their covert racist policy and quietly usher in this unconscionable promotion. Having paid lip service to the NAACP's 10 shared principles and having passed the resolution to end systemic racism, you're now expected to elevate Ali Lewis's assailants. You communicated to Urbana's Black community, hey, look, we care. Black lives matter to us. But your resolutions ring hollow. The
Thank you,
reality
Sarah.
is,
I believe your time is up. Thank you. Next up is Tacey Miller.
Hi, my name is Tacey Miller and I live in the 700 block of West California Avenue. I'm a newcomer to West Urbana. Having moved here only a few years ago, I bought the old Paley house. I'm asking that you vote no on the PUD ordinance. I moved here for the quality of life, all the things that were listed in the top 10 neighborhoods of 2007. But I have to say, in my short time here, I've seen rapid deterioration of the neighborhood. A lot of old houses that used to be rentals for students not getting rented, vacancies going on for entire years, sometimes 2 years at a time. I'd see this on my walks with my dog. And seen a lot of new apartment buildings going up everywhere. I mean, every time I would go away for a short period of time and come back, it seems like there's a new building, apartment building. So I don't think we're building new apartment buildings because there's a housing shortage. I'm not, it seems that it's development for development's sake. I too would like to voice my vote for rehabbing old properties. I would love to see, and I've talked to people about this before, and I'm not quite sure how to get it off the ground. There has to be a way that we can develop a program to potentially train people in carpentry skills at the same time we rehab these properties, and make a program for first-time homeowners, right? If we want to have an equitable future, why not make opportunity for people who normally can't own a home, own a home? And I think it's a little disingenuous when I hear Tracy Chong, sort of deriding anyone who's a homeowner, given that she owns 3 properties at least, and her good friend, Chris Hansen, owns 9 properties on Illinois alone. For all the reasons that everybody stated, the 50% greater footprint in zoning permits, taking up 70% of the block, the flooding, the loss of mature canopy trees, and I would like to add the issue of converting what used to be multiple driveways into one single entry exit point onto West California. It's going to make getting out across Lincoln more hazardous than it already is, and divert a whole bunch of traffic into the R2 areas of West Urbana. The flooding happens not only at Kohler in Oregon, it also happens on California, but it's not just as severe as it is on Oregon. We're still in the middle of a global pandemic. What the new normal is going to look like is not clear to anyone yet. We've had a tumultuous year with social justice, and we're striving to create a more equitable future. It just doesn't seem the time to give a developer a whole bunch of variances for a project that isn't future-proof. I hope you will vote no tonight, and may we keep buildings that are incompatible out. Again, as Tamara said, I'm not against development. Let's have the right kind of development for the town of Urbana. Thank you.
Okay. We have no other hands up, and we have reached the end of the hour for public input. So we'll move on to council input and communications. Does anyone have anything to say? Mary Alice?
Yeah, so I just wanted to let council and the public know that Charisse is working hard at equity in terms of the COVID vaccines. She's been working with the public health district and trying to get the African-American population vaccinated. So I think she's been doing this on her own, well, not on her own, with the help of a couple of other individuals. She's been signing people up, and I think you've got 78 people now on your list, Charisse. Is that right? So I just wanted to let everybody know that she's been working hard at something that is not equitable at the moment. So we don't have equal distribution of African-American populations getting vaccinated in proportion to their population. So thank you, Charisse, for all that work.
Thank you, Mary Alice, for saying that. I was trying to kind of keep that on the down low a little bit. But yes, I had a conversation with Julie Pride, and we've emailed back and forth, and I just wanted to, I know I've had a difficult time, and I'm still having a difficult time getting an appointment. And I knew that if I was having a difficult time, there were probably several other people. So I got some help from some people, and and managed to get about 77 people inoculated, are scheduled for a vaccination. So that's about it. And that's it.
Any other council comments? Okay. Additions to the agenda, there are none. There's no unfinished business. We'll move on to reports of the Committee of the Whole. We have a consent agenda. Bill Colbrook.
Thank you, ma'am. The Committee of the Whole met last Monday, March 1st. And like the mayor said, there are items on the consent agenda, but it's my understanding that the first three listed A, B, and C are going to be pulled off of the consent agenda and put, I believe, in the regular agenda. Is that correct?
Well, they'll be considered after the last three items in the consent agenda. Yes.
Okay. So I'll read the three resolutions as part of the consent agenda. Resolution number 2021-03-008R, a resolution authorizing a federal excise equipment cooperation agreement with the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. Second one is resolution number 2021-03-009R, a resolution for improvement under the Illinois Highway Code, state motor fuel tax for Lincoln and Springfield resurfacing project. And lastly, the resolution number 2021-03-010R, a resolution for improvement under the Illinois Highway Code, state motor fuel tax for Race Street resurfacing project. On behalf of the committee, I move for approval.
There's a second. Moved by Bill Colbrook, seconded by Jared. Will the clerk please call the roll?
I actually have a question for you. First of all, I'd like to apologize. This laptop keeps kicking me out of this Zoom thing. But my question to you is, are you passing this, or is this just something that's going to go to the other part of the agenda, to the regular agenda item? Is that what this is about?
These three were passing.
You're passing them as they are, or are you going to move them off the consent agenda?
These are the three that will be passed as they are. And then there's items A, B, and C on the consent agenda are being moved off the consent agenda.
Okay, so then these are the resolutions, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right, here we go. Ms. Wu?
Yes.
Mr. Sachs?
Yes.
Ms. Hersey?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts? Mr. Roberts?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Mr. Colebrook?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
That motion passes.
So moved off of the consent agenda was ordinance number 2021-03-005, an ordinance approving an amendment to a solar facility ground lease central. Although it was on the consent agenda, on behalf of the committee, I move for approval.
I'll second.
And I would note that the city council members were sent amended versions today. Basically, they had to add standard language, and Scott Tess is here to explain.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Apologies for having to pull this off of consent agenda. And thank you to Wendy Hundley in the clerk's office who caught these technical deficiencies. There's just a couple of things that were not in the original ordinances that relate to passing this as an ordinance rather than a resolution that we need to, as floor amendments, add into the ordinances. I want to stress that the easements and the leases remain unchanged from what you looked at Committee of the Whole. It's just some technical things in the ordinances that we're going to change. And if you want, if you'd like to look at those, I can show them on a screen share.
I'd like to see them.
Yeah, it might be good to see them, at least for one instance, just for everybody's awareness.
Because the wording, I believe, is all the same, isn't it?
They're all the same for all three ordinances, these changes. I've got them underlined. The first is be it ordained rather than be it resolved. So this is an ordinance rather than a resolution. And then the section 2 and 3 and 4. And what I originally sent you, I overcopied. I copied too much. It should have ended at corporate authorities, not to all three ordinances. If you look back at the memo, the quotation mark ends at authorities, but this should apply to all three ordinances. So section 3 and 4, and also be it ordained rather than be it resolved.
So actually the correct motion should be move approval of this ordinance as amended.
I was just going to say that. So yes, on behalf of the committee, I move for approval of this ordinance as stated with the amendments as stated by Mr. Scott Tess.
And I will second that.
Any discussion? Will clerk please call the roll?
There's one more technicality before we go forward. When you guys removed that from the consent agenda, you needed to have a motion and a second to remove that from the agenda to the right place, which is where it is now. So I should have said something then, but I was muted.
Okay, well, I can handle that.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion that we remove ordinance number 2021-03-005, ordinance number 2021-03-006, and ordinance number 2021-03-007 from the consent agenda to the regular agenda due to changes in text.
I'll second.
Okay.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu?
Yes.
Mr. Sachs?
Yes.
Ms. Hersey?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Okay, now we're set.
So now I'd still like to restate my motion on behalf of the committee for approval, ordinance number 2021-003-005, an ordinance approving an amendment to the solar facility ground lease with the floor amendment as explained by Mr. Tess.
I will second that again.
Any discussion? If not, will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu?
Yes.
Mr. Sachs?
Yes.
Ms. Hersey?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
That motion passes.
The next ordinance is ordinance number 2021-03-006, an ordinance approving an amendment to a solar facility ground lease, the east part. And this on behalf of the committee, I move for approval with the floor amendment as explained by Mr. Tess, that is similar to the last ordinance that we just adopted.
Is there a second?
A second.
Moved by Bill Colebrook, seconded by Sharice. Any discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu?
Yes.
Mr. Sachs?
Yes.
Ms. Hersey?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
That motion passes.
Next up is ordinance number 2021-03-007, an ordinance approving an easement with Ameren, Illinois. Once again, on behalf of the committee, I move for approval with the floor amendment as described by Mr. Tess, which is exactly the same as the other two.
Second that.
Moved by Bill Colebrook, seconded by Dennis. Any discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu?
Yes.
Mr. Sachs?
Yes.
Mr. Hersey?
Yes.
Ms. Hersey, I'm sorry, forgive me. Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
That motion passes.
And next up on the agenda is ordinance number 2020-12-070, an ordinance approving a preliminary development plan for a planned unit development, 602 South Lincoln Avenue, CCH Development LLC and CMH Development LLC, plan case 2411 PUD 20. And we also have a companion ordinance if you want to do it together, or we can do it in conjunction with this one. That's ordinance number 2020-12-071, an ordinance approving a final development plan for a planned unit development, 602 South Lincoln Avenue, CCH Development LLC and CMH Development LLC, plan case 2412 PUD 20. This is actually sent to the council with no recommendation, both of them.
Could we get a motion and a second to get this on the floor?
I will make a motion for, I guess, discussion with no recommendation.
A second.
We do have Chris Hartman here tonight, the developer who'd like to address the council and the public, and that would be followed by members of city staff who wanted to provide some additional information before council discussion. So, Mr. Hartman.
Yes, hello. Thank you, Mayor Marlin, and thank you everybody else for all the time that you've put into listening hearing about this project. I would like to address a couple of the specific items discussed last week, but before that, I'd like to provide a little context around the project and a little bit of history that may, hopefully dispel some of the preconceived notions that I've heard, and also just give you a little background on how we got to where we are today. First off, I grew up in Urbana, so I didn't grow up in the Woona neighborhood, but I did spend a lot of time in my childhood riding bikes around there with friends and spending time in Blair Park. And, it's a community I love. And so, I guess I've heard on a few occasions that out-of-town developers come in and impose their will. And I just want the council to know that anything that we invest in this community comes from a place of respect for Urbana. Another thing I want everyone to understand about our particular strategy, we are long-term investors. We develop and renovate. We've actually done quite a bit of ground-up development. We've done quite a bit of renovations in the city of Urbana, renovated old structures and old apartments and brought them up to current standards, as well as ground up. And we do everything for the long term, which to us leads to better material decisions, better systems decisions, and a lot of that, again, informed where we ended up today on this project. For the history of this, we really started getting involved in 2013 and purchased the properties, or the 6 parcels, 6 of the parcels in 2015, really with no preconceived notions of what this may become. With the knowledge that it may always be what sits there. And so the idea that we bought something and then wanted to impose our will upon the community to change the ordinance that's not how I look at it. What we did is we purchased it knowing that we felt it was a good location and it had existing rental housing that we knew we could manage. And subsequent to that, we had 2 separate development groups approach us to buy our parcels along with the 4 other parcels and propose developments to the city. And both of them ended up backing out of the deals. They were much larger, more dense developments. I think a lot less respectful to the intent of the corridor. And so we observed that, and it was what it was. And so when we decided to try and redevelop the block, we really came at it from a different angle and did something that we thought was, first it had to be financially feasible, but really something that we felt would fit in better than what had been proposed before us. As far as the density, the FAR is about 25% over what exists there currently, with really no change in occupancy. this is true, but really what that speaks to from my perspective is we're providing the same number of people, housing for the same number of people in better living conditions, better units, single occupancy units in a better building. So, you know, I looked at the surrounding block, I looked at Europa House and thought that, you know, the density of what we're proposing was appropriate from our perspective. Again, this is our perspective. It was a thoughtful process. We spent a lot of time reviewing the requirements and design requirements. And, you know, I know the neighborhood, and we actually spent a lot of time reviewing the aesthetics. We designed something we thought was clean and modern, but had a residential theme, and we thought it was respectful of the neighborhood. I understand that not everyone shares our taste. I was surprised to hear "but ugly," but, you know, I'm proud of what we put forward. I think I like the way it looks, and so did our team. And I think our architecture team, Mode 3, did a great job. And I really like the aesthetic that they put in a lot of their projects around the area. And a couple other points, just I wanted everyone to consider, you know, what we're proposing is really a big step up over the current uses in energy efficiency. Accessibility is a big thing. You know, everything is going to be accessible versus now where nothing is, or at least adaptable on the higher floors. Safety is a big consideration, both within the project and for pedestrians. We are reducing the number of driveways, which is true, but that does decrease the number of interactions between cars and pedestrians, and we're bringing the sidewalks back, and I think providing a more walkable environment along Lincoln. And we're really increasing the diversity of housing options in the area. These are all single occupancy units. I think, you know, one of the things I reacted to was, I know people don't like student housing because there's a party aspect to it, and you do tend to see that in the 4-bedroom, larger bedroom, you know, formats. And these are all single occupancy and really suitable not just for students, but young professionals. We actually built a building near Parkland with very similar floor plans, studios and 1-bedrooms, and it's primarily young professionals and graduate students, and it's been very popular for the non-student population. So we're excited about that aspect of it. I did want to speak a little bit to financial feasibility. You know, the project itself is, we've made quite a few changes. We have listened through the process. We've increased efficiency. We've made quite a few changes to it that have increased the cost, and really it is sort of on the brink of a go, no go from a financial viability perspective, and which is the way these things go. One thing I want to point out, that a redesign at this point, a full redesign, would put us past sort of the deadline that we need to, we couldn't start this process over again and develop it this year. It would change the delivery date, which actually would more than likely, if not certainly, make the project completely not viable for a few reasons. One thing I want, you know, there's been a little bit of talk, or there was a little bit of talk about the opportunity zone earlier in this process, and this project does lie in an opportunity zone. So one of the reasons we're able to develop something that's low density and single occupancy and still be able to develop it is because of the opportunity zone, which is you know, a program that's in place until 2026 that allows investors to defer capital gains into qualifying projects in the zone. One thing that you have to understand is that the benefit of that decreases each year as you approach 2026 because the deferral gets shorter. So the time value of the deferred gains decreases. And so the investors that we have that are interested in this now will have less benefit if this project is pushed. And furthermore, whatever investment capital that they've decided or earmarked for this will have missed the window for this development. So, you know, for that reason, I think if a future developer were to look at this, you know, let's say that this were not to pass, I don't see that another project of this density would happen, right? And that's a choice that you can make. But I do think that we're at a unique inflection point to make this project possible, to really, in my estimation, improve the housing stock of that block. And just for a little, just to be completely clear, we own 6 of the 10 parcels. 4 of the parcels are under contract contingent on this process. So what that means is a no vote tonight, cancels those contracts. And so like the Axiom building, for instance, goes back to Axiom. And it's very unlikely that anyone would undertake a redesign of this at this point after the sort of the 3 failed projects, if you will. And so I think tonight the vote is not really, is it this project or a better project? It's just, is it this project or no project at all? And, if it's no project at all, then we will continue to manage what's there to the best of our ability. One thing that Tacey Miller brought up that it's interesting, and as an owner of rental housing and investor, there is an issue with some of the older rental housing stock in the neighborhood, and a lot of it has to do with functional obsolescence, and a lot of it has to do with the state of the rental market because of the amount of supply that has gone up to the west of campus. What you find is higher amenitized buildings, newer buildings, buildings that are safer, elevator buildings, so many options that are really hurting the rental housing stock. That the renters that used to fill up the rental housing in the West Urbana neighborhood are choosing to live elsewhere. And I do see that as an issue. And what you see is declining rents and declining property values. So the idea that this project will make property values decline in the neighborhood, I don't think that that's true. I think that the opposite is true. We'll remove some of the functional obsolescence and bring a little bit of life and usability back to the neighborhood. So, I think we came from a good place in proposing this. We do like the way it looks. I understand that that's an issue for a lot of people. But, we're excited about it. We're excited about this project if it's passed tonight. And we think it's going to be a great addition to the neighborhood, honestly. So there were some specific things that I wanted to address that came up last week. There has been quite a bit of talk about stormwater and permeable pavers. We're more than willing to look at the amount of permeable pavers on site and increase it, but we're at a point where we really need to do more civil engineering to decide. We need a civil engineer to tell us what we can do. And the question may come up, well, why haven't you done that already? There's a real delicate balance for us. We've spent an awful lot of money on the front end to get to this point, and there's a certain amount of level of design that you don't do and pay for if you don't know if the project's going to happen. And so talk to staff about this. There is a amendment that circulated that basically says we'll work to maximize the permeable pavement on the site pending a review from a civil engineer. We're happy to do that. We're happy to increase the amount of permeable pavers if it's structurally possible. There were some questions about trees, which tree, some of the trees that were, I believe what I heard were some of the trees should be replaced. We've actually endeavored to save most of the trees on the site. But I've heard some objections to some of them, and we're happy to look at the current tree preservation plan and look at trees that we've decided to preserve. And I think that there was some sentiment that some of those should actually be replaced. That's fine with us. And then there was, we heard a lot of questions about the design and colors, but the one specific thing that came out of that meeting was the shape of the stone. And we're happy, we sent some more samples over. We're happy to substitute the base stone for a stone of a different shape that's more aesthetically agreeable to the group. So those were the 3 specific things that came out of last week that I want to make sure we address today. And that's really what I came to say. I humbly request that you vote to approve the project. I believe it'll unquestionably improve the efficiency and the safety and the usability of the neighborhood. We're excited about it, and we're really ready to, get a yes vote tonight to hit the ground running and make the large investment that this represents. So thanks for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Hartman? Dennis.
Yeah, Chris, it's been represented by the firm that you and the architect had tried to make this development match the community and the standards of design that are in the community. And one of the problems I find is that I don't see how that was fulfilled. You have stated that you're emulating the craftsman style workmanship seen in the West Urbana neighborhood. And as I look at your project, I don't see any evidence of a craftsman style approach to this building, either in the sense of detailed architecture, of any kinds of craftsman style use of materials necessarily, or features that are architectural. Can you tell me where they are and why did I miss them?
Sure. I apologize if I mentioned craftsman style. That's certainly not something. I'm not an architect, and I don't believe that we intended for this to emulate a craftsman style necessarily. There's sort of a modern farmhouse aspect to it, is the one thing I would call it, based on other projects we studied that we thought looked good in some other areas, notably in the Chicago suburbs. But I guess I would defer to Josh Daly, who's on the call, who was the architect, if there are some craftsman features that they intended, but that wasn't, hopefully I didn't represent that, because that's not something that I know about.
Maybe when he has that discussion, he can point out what features he felt were matching historic buildings in the Woona neighborhood.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I think on one previous meeting, I threw out a quasi craftsman look at one point. I'm with Chris. I think it's more of what I would call kind of a modern country house look. Some of the details would be the overhangs. The overhangs are a couple of feet, about 2 feet. And we also have some small bracketed eyebrows over some windows as well. And then it's just the use of the stone partially way up the structures with either a vertical board and battens or a siding, which is very common in that style. You know, we can sit here and just debate all day long about styles left and right. I don't think we need to talk about styles. There's no coherent style in any of this in the neighborhood, period. I think it's using stone, using things that are definitely in the area. It's very Midwestern, let's put it that way. This is a very Midwestern look with using lap siding, stone, and a vertical board and batten look. You have shingled roofs, overhangs. There's some bracketed areas. That's probably what I would, if I had to key in on anything that would be any craftsman look, it would be that. It would be these small brackets that are over some window groupings. I guess to match, and I use the word match. I'm not trying to match something exactly a block away or 2 blocks away. It's window groupings. If there's one thing that this neighborhood has, is lots of the old structures have window groupings, where it was very popular to take smaller windows and you would put studs between them and group them together. So we have done that on this extensively. If I'm going to say match, that would be a main feature right there, is larger windows that are grouped. That would be one thing. I guess that's where I'll stop with that. I don't want to get hung up on the craftsman thing. I know I said that at one point, but you know, we're in the modern era. I don't think we need to label anything a certain style anymore. You just can't really do that. We're not expected to do something that was 100% historic. If this was some historic district where we had to do Georgian or Italianate or something like that, this would be different. So I think we're pulling from a lot of different sources when we design this. I don't know if that answers your question or not very well, but that was it for me.
Yeah, I'll make comments about that when we have discussion.
Questions, Bill Brown.
Yeah, I wonder if Chris could shed some light on, the main thing that I'm going through my head is the advantages versus disadvantages of doing a planned unit development. I know that the northern half of this block is already zoned R4. The southern half is R7. So R7 is like dormitories, living houses, other group living sort of facilities. In R4, we have lots of apartments that you can actually get to the 0.7 FAR, not quite to the 0.76 that you're asking for, but you can get to 0.7 by offering fewer units with more bedrooms. So that you could get probably 11 or 12 4-bedroom units on the northern half there. So I know you mentioned some of the advantages of having one development, but that's also seen as a disadvantage apparently by a lot of the neighbors. And I agree, one drive shouldn't be a problem with 40 cars in there. I think there was a traffic study. I don't know if it was done on this one or a previous one, but it was 20 cars per hour or something like that at peak times. So besides, is there anything you think we're missing as far as advantages to doing one large development versus developing the two sides or each lot separately? The two sides could, be combined in some other way and just developed not as a planned unit development, but by right. Do you have any thoughts or comments on that?
Sure. Yeah, primarily it's the existence of R7 that, to me necessitated the need to do a planned unit development. I don't think that the R7 zoning is relevant anymore for new development. I don't think rooming houses or dormitories are something that the neighborhood wants. The idea of yes, we could have done smaller buildings with 4 bedrooms to achieve sort of the return, metrics needed to justify building new, but as I mentioned earlier, I did not think that the neighborhood or that anybody would want to see 4 bedrooms developed there, and we felt single occupancy would be really the most compatible. It would bring a group of renters that would be compatible with the neighborhood versus a more typical undergraduate population. So that's the reason that we decided to make it one development. Making it one development is more efficient. I think making several smaller developments on individual parcels wouldn't have penciled out opportunity zone or not. And and again, I think that the R7 is something that we just didn't really even consider. We didn't believe that would be even a consideration. It should even be in our consideration set.
Okay, and as far as like the utilities lines going through, I know there must be one at least that goes east to west that will have to be taken down or go underground or something. So I guess that would be cleaned up. Is that right?
Correct. All of those will be relocated. There will be no overhead utility lines. It will be brought back to, the utility lines serve the existing structures. So it would be brought back to the utility pole that is to the furthest east, and the project then would be served underground with a pad mount transformer. So that would be cleaned up.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Eric?
So Chris, given that this neighborhood has a long history of strong views about preserving the architectural integrity, and why was there never an attempt to reach out to the community and ask them what aesthetic and what kind of structure and residence they would like to see there?
Well, we did go through the planning and the design review process, and there was quite a bit of public comment. There was actually, we were written letters, we were given feedback that we responded to. We felt that that was the appropriate forum to get feedback from the public, was through that several step process that the city of Urbana has in place.
Yeah, that's a pretty formal process, but it doesn't ever really give an opportunity for a dialogue between a potential developer and the community. I could see, some sort of artist renditions and getting feedback about what people like and don't like being much more productive. I think we get to this endpoint so quickly without any real dialogue that it leads to difficulty all along.
I respect that view, and I understand. I've learned a lot in this process. For us, this hasn't been very quick. We have gone back and forth through a lot of different iterations, but I can see how it would be viewed that way from your side. What I've found in my experience is you're going to get a cacophony of opinions in any process. And I understand that it seems like that maybe there is a more cohesive design aesthetic that people would like in WUNA. However, it does also seem from the input that I've gotten throughout the process that you've got as diverse number of opinions about what things should look like as the buildings that exist in WUNA already are. It's an extremely diverse neighborhood. I mean, there are so many different styles there. I think you would end up with, I'm not sure that you would end up with a comprehensive or at least a cohesive recommendation if everybody got together and said what they'd like to see. And so we did think that the process we went through provided a lot of iteration and comment. And, in retrospect, if we had an opportunity to sit down with maybe the 100 people who signed that letter and they had said, this is what we want to see, then that would have made this process a lot better.
Any other questions? Charisse?
I guess the main question I have is regarding the the issues, because I'm looking at it says where and when design guidelines apply. Lincoln-Busey corridor is bounded by Illinois Street on the north, Pennsylvania Avenue on the south, Lincoln Avenue on the west, and Busey Avenue on the east. These guidelines are to be used to review development plans for the following projects in the Lincoln corridor. So, and then there's a list: construction of a new principal structure, or increasing the building footprint of any existing principal structure greater than 15%, or increasing the floor area ratio of an existing principal structure of more than 15%, or installing or enlarging a parking lot, or substantially changing the appearance and or scale of an existing building as determined by the zoning administrator in consultation with the design review board chair. And this is really only my first, discussion regarding a PUD that does not seem to understand, I don't know, that there are design guidelines. You're asking us to forgive everything on that list and let it go through. And so, am I wrong? I mean, I could be wrong because, like I said, this is my first time actually.
I think staff would like to address that.
Yeah.
Charisse, this project did go through the design review board. So it was reviewed with respect to those Lincoln-Busey design guidelines, and the design review board unanimously approved the design of the project.
I don't think they did.
but, okay.
Yeah, just to add in, I'm sorry if I interrupt, but we did, is to the best of our ability, conform to the design guidelines, and that's what the DRB process was for. So I know that some of the commentary today was that we didn't, but we have never been given any specific feedback how we did not, and we did pass that board unanimously.
Okay. Doesn't it also have something to do with particular materials, Kevin?
Yeah, the design review board gave some options for alternative materials that could be used, but they did approve the materials that are proposed for the project. So it was to give council some options. So that was so that it wouldn't have to get kicked back to design review board if council, say for instance, wanted them to change the stone from what they had proposed, because otherwise you could just keep kicking it back between design review and then to council. So they were trying to give some options to council with respect to materials.
What would have happened had they not given us that leeway?
Well, I mean, I suppose if they didn't, and then say council didn't like their choice of stone, then council could have denied the project or said, it needs to go back to design review board and you need to select a different material. So, again, that just draws out the process.
Okay, I'm going to stop there.
Mary Alice?
Yes, thank you, Chris, for coming tonight. I guess I'd like to push back a little bit and say that the design review board did give specific items that they wanted to see in this project. And, I know that you've been open to changing some of the stones, so thank you for that. I won't go, I talked a lot about the siding before, so I'm not going to go into details about that. But I guess I just want to echo what Eric was talking about. And I feel like these projects, we definitely want development in not only West Urbana, but in Urbana. And I think those conversations need to start with the neighborhood in which they're taking place in. And I understand that there is a diversity of opinion out there. But certainly getting the neighborhood backing will move this process really quickly, and it wouldn't take this long. And so in my opinion, that was, I understand that you can't go back in time, but that was a misstep. So I just wanted to kind of say my piece a little bit about that. I have more to say during the discussion.
So let's stick, are there any other specific questions for Chris Hartman or his team? Dennis?
One of the guidelines for the design in the Lincoln-Busey corridor is that entrances should be prominent on the surface of the buildings facing the street. And I see that on the elevation designs for these smaller units on both California and in Oregon meet that requirement. But I don't see that this is happening at all on the streets facing Lincoln, which is a very large facade that's 1 block long. What we have are narrow passageways going to the interior, but not actually into the building itself. So where are the entrances to the apartment building on Lincoln Avenue? Where are they located?
This is Josh again. I can answer that one. Those entrances would be, like you're saying, leading to those walkways. They're covered walkways that would
have passages between the buildings.
Correct.
And they lead to what?
They lead to the doors to the apartments. So upon entering through the portico that we made with the 2 little columns and the roofs over those, you would be entering through there, and then immediately to your right or to your left would be the doors to those ground floor units, is how it would work.
So it's like a vestibule?
Correct. Yes, you would enter through. I wouldn't. It's not a vestibule. It's a walkway. It would go full through all the way through to the parking is what it would do. We debated leaving that not covered at one time, but we thought it would be better for residents if it was covered. And that's why in previous conversations about this, we actually have, it's really 3 buildings. When you look at Lincoln Avenue, it's 3 buildings. There'll be 3 buildings with varying roof heights. The lowest roof will be over these walkways. So to accentuate those entrances, we did a little column and some roof, like a gable roof over those to mark those. And then of course the sidewalk leading to public way. I think once the landscaping is there, I think once the shadow lines are realized, once you see this in 3 dimensions walking down the sidewalk or from the street, I think it will look like entrances in the end.
Well, it's interesting. I would say that those little columns and the tiny pediment over them is probably the very only element in this entire design that actually imitates anything you see in the Woona neighborhood as far as the older homes. And I was wondering whether the major entrance was actually off the parking lot.
No, the major entrance would be, I mean, we'd have them, like you said, on California and Oregon, we've got some that lead directly into the apartments.
Yes.
And then we've got some that actually walk along the building to another stairway that leads to a 2nd floor. So we're trying to just keep the 2 entrances on Lincoln. It's other factors come into play too. It's about safety as well. If we can have covered entrances that are on these walkways, it's better for the tenants. We can have a better protected entry to each apartment.
Is there a door that opens onto those entries?
No, but there could be.
Because I don't see how that's a safety feature. I think in a certain sense, that's actually a hazard for people to be in a dark corridor that's open on both ends to people who might be passing through and maybe accosting an individual as they're trying to enter their building. In a dark corridor, it would be more advantageous for that to happen than if it was an open area.
Sure. I think the idea was to try to look through, to be able to see all the way through was the idea. But I understand your point. These corridors we could put a door on the Lincoln side and we could put a door on the parking side to enclose it. Like you're saying, we could do that.
We also, those corridors will ultimately be well lit and, not that it's part of this process, but, we do put security in all of our new developments. And so that the security of this will be much improved to what's there. And I think it's, safety is a high priority for us in our new developments.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from council members who haven't spoken yet? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to staff comments. Did you have anything to add, Kevin?
Maybe take a look here. So I did want to, Chris, I think he addressed the stormwater concerns that some folks brought up earlier. I guess I'd just restate that a stormwater management plan would be something that they would need to submit further on down the process, and that would get reviewed by our civil engineers, and that would have to be approved as part of the process. Chris mentioned that we had proposed a possible condition regarding the permeable pavers to give the developers some more leeway to increase the area of permeable pavers.
So I can share the draft language here on my screen. Oh, there we go. Okay, so it says, I'll just read this. So this would be the draft condition. It says, subject to the findings of a civil engineering analysis, stormwater detention requirements, and loading patterns as reflected in the final design, the applicant will maximize the use of permeable pavers in the parking area and drive aisles, but in no case shall there be less area covered in permeable pavers than that depicted on ordinance attachment A. So essentially this would require that the area of permeable pavement be maximized and not just be what they are showing right now. But again, this is one of those things that you need to really do the site engineering work and analysis before you can actually know for certain how much permeable pavement would make sense for the site. Couple other points are, and I mentioned this before, but I'll just state it again. So there were a few comments tonight about how this design doesn't meet the Lincoln-Busey corridor design guidelines. Again, the design review board reviewed the design. They unanimously approved the design with some conditions. And then finally, I just want to emphasize that council's decision tonight should be based on the PUD criteria, and really to make that explicit when you make a decision. And I think that's all I have.
Okay, we'll move on to council discussion. Mary Alice.
So I've been taking notes about a couple of things, and I recognize that at the moment we are talking about the PUD criteria. So I'd like to start off with this. In the staff report based on December 3rd, they listed several goals and objectives from the comprehensive plan that it met. So I'm going to read them in case people haven't read them recently. So number 1 is preserve and enhance the character of Urbana's established residential neighborhoods, promote established neighborhoods close to campus and the downtown as attractive places for people to live. Goal number 2, new development in an established neighborhood will be compatible with the overall urban design and fabric of that neighborhood. And under those specifically are 2.1, ensure that the site design for a new development in established neighborhoods is compatible with the built fabric of that neighborhood. And 2.4, promote development that residents and visitors recognize as being of high quality and aesthetically pleasing. Well, there's been a lot of commentary today from the public. There's been a petition by 100 neighbors in this area. And I think that overwhelmingly, we know that it is not aesthetically pleasing, nor that it is compatible with the built framework of our existing neighborhood. In addition, the developer talked about the diversity of the housing. And I agree. I think we're very fortunate in Urbana to have diversity of housing. And that really fundamentally is one of the issues here. We're talking about 70% of the block. That is a large footprint. If we're talking about diversity of housing styles, right now we're going to be saying that we're going to have 70% of a block face that is going to be in a modern housing, Midwestern modern housing, that I don't see in West Urbana. I don't see this type of any of it, any of the architecture within Urbana. And so I feel that if we approve this tonight, which I strongly advocate we should not, that we will be forever changing this Lincoln-Busey corridor with this high footprint of this building. So those are some of my things. I do want to say that I did take the materials that we talked about last week very seriously. I went and looked at the Gather project on the southeast corner of University, which has brick and engineered wood. I also went and looked at the 200 Vine Street, which has brick and engineered wood. And I would say from my perspective, they are not high quality materials. The brick is nice, but abutted with it, with the engineering wood, just is not a good look. And so that's one of the reasons why I was pushing so hard last time for natural materials to be used, either the wood or the cedar, or of course there's also brick and there's other items that are natural. So I'd be willing to listen to other council members' thoughts.
Dennis. Dennis.
Many of the aspects of the project can be appealing. The work that the developer has done to introduce permeable pavement is laudable. Alternative energy charging stations is laudable. Saving some of the trees is laudable. But the elephant in the room is the project itself and its footprint. It's massive, and although it has been broken up slightly on the side streets of California and Oregon, to a degree that probably could be acceptable, the continuous facade along Lincoln is monumental in comparison to anything we've seen. Actually, if anything, it models the large buildings across the street in the university corridor on the campus itself. But it doesn't simulate or match them in style or quality of design. The design has just been described as some kind of Midwestern farmhouse style, which wasn't exactly accurate, but it's what's replacing the comment about that this was supposed to be a craftsman style kind of approach to simulate buildings that exist in the neighborhood. And what I found is that it's merely apartment modern as seen across the community for any kind of student housing. It's sort of, yeah, there are gables on the roofs, and there are, certain windows are grouped, not necessarily that makes that a craftsman element in this day and age. Really, it's made out of substitute materials, manufactured materials that are commonly used in student housing near the campus, and actually very similar to the kind of style and construction that was originally offered in the 200 block of South Vine Street by Green Street Realty, which was summarily negated and dropped and changed after review by council members in consultation with the designer and feedback from the Huna neighborhood. And the Huna neighborhood is much more forgiving than the Wuna neighborhood as far as a desire to match style in its construction areas. So I just drove up to Chicago, in the suburbs of Chicago, for a meeting over the weekend. And as I was driving, I was observing the kinds of buildings that we find being built in the suburbs of Chicago. And unilaterally, new construction, probably for the last 15 or 20 years, all looks the same. It's all been, all the construction is kind of like a patchwork surface quality where every single story on the building has got some other color or material to make it, I don't know, jazzed up or seem interesting. Brick on the bottom, and then there's horizontal paneling, then there's vertical paneling, and a quarter of it will be blue and a quarter of it will be gray, and some of it will be white. And it's kind of a hodgepodge of modern materials, which end up being kind of the non-style of modern architecture. So unfortunately, I don't see how this building is any different than any of the buildings I've just mentioned. And I can't find how it correlates to architectural style in what we know as architectural style from, say, a design class in architecture to the buildings that are nearby it. And so, we're talking aesthetics, but it'd be a mistake to think that aesthetics don't affect how things look and how they're appreciated, and the quality that materials and design contribute to a building can affect its success and its merit. Unfortunately, we don't have hardly any designers, architects today that match the aesthetic of a Joe Royer, who can design a building that is both attractive, functional, and looks like it was designed with one concept in mind, rather than sewn together in pieces to facilitate some kind of a snappy modernism. And I guess what I really miss is the fact that, especially the facade, I don't really so much matter, it doesn't really bother me so much about the California or in Oregon, smaller buildings. I think they might fit in perhaps. But the facade along Lincoln Avenue should be imposing and handsome, and it should be appealing and significant. And I really find that this just doesn't go there. So if we're thinking about what the design guidelines are in the Busey corridor, I think it sort of fails, unfortunately. And also the materials just don't match the quality of materials that many of the houses in the Busey corridor have. There's a lot of stucco, there's a lot of shake shingle, but there's also a lot of brick. And across the street, there's a lot of brick. And the one thing that's not here is brick. If the facade on Lincoln had brick, it would really come so much closer to matching the quality of the materials and perhaps even the look of a quality building matching other buildings along the Lincoln Avenue. And so I'm just wondering if it wouldn't be a consideration to turn the conversation around, to reconsider the facing on the facade along Lincoln Avenue, to make a brick the most prominent feature, and add, limestone lintel bars under the windows and above the windows to suggest that there's a real architectural style going on here. But when you have windows that have no features at all, they're not framed in any way significantly, you have just modern blah. And when they call it butt ugly, I don't say it's butt ugly, but it's certainly it's not designed, it's just assembled. So I have a real concern for that. Thank you.
Any other council comments? Bill Colbrook.
I'm going to respectfully disagree with most of the comments that have already been made. I'm just going to reiterate some of the comments that I made last week. We've heard comments from last week and this week that this design passed through the design review board. I don't know why there's any dispute about that. I saw a couple council members shaking their head. Either it was or it wasn't. It would not have gotten this far if it wasn't. I think the record clearly shows that it passed through the design review board. I think the developers have clearly worked within the rules. If we don't like the rules, let's change the rules. But I don't think it's fair at all to hold up this project just because you don't like the look of it. If you don't like the rules, let's go back, change the rules. Let's not punish these developers because they followed the rules, because they passed through the decision-making processes that they were required to do. I find us arguing whether we're going to call it a little puppy or a dog. I mean, honestly, this isn't our job. I think we are once again swimming out of our lane. We need, as a council, to decide: did they follow the rules? And I think the testimony has been yes, they did. Did they follow the ordinances with the variance? Yes, they did. I think our job is to approve this because, quite frankly, I think it's an attractive building. I like the farmhouse look. Whatever look we want to call it, I like it. The job of the developer was not to mimic what is west of Lincoln Avenue and make it look like a U of I building. There's also discussion that if you look at the neighborhood, there is no one set design. So I think it's completely inappropriate for us to try to hold the developers to some impossible standard to mimic what's in the neighborhood when I think by agreement, we say that there's no one design. So they by that standard, they're in a no-win situation. I believe they've done the best that they could to build a building that is not, 4-bedroom apartments. They're single occupancy. I think it's an attractive building. And I think we've got to be really, really careful of the way we split hairs and the way we kind of beat people over the head about designs, because, to me, economic development in Urbana is one of my stalwarts. I mean, I think that, we need to move forward as a city. I think this block is going to lay dormant for years because we as a city council are basically telling developers, don't come play here. We're going to beat you over the head. And because I don't like the way you design your building. I think unequivocally, because our job is to test whether they follow the rules, the answer is yes. We vote yes.
Bill Brown.
Yeah, I just go through my thought process a little bit. I agree that we need to be careful to follow the zoning ordinance. We've established rules, and just like one of the speakers said, when they bought their house, they bought it in a R2 zoning, and they knew, expected it to stay R2, and it will. This is R4 and R7, and it's in the Lincoln-Busey corridor that has established guidelines. And I was looking again today at them, and it designates that particular block as higher intensity of the corridor, that and the one north of it. And then the ones south of there are lower intensity, and there's kind of an angle through there. It's all very, very precisely laid out. So, as far as the density goes and what you're expecting from developers, I think they've definitely accomplished that. And I watched the design review board meeting again this weekend for the second time, the 4-hour meeting. And after getting that letter last week that claimed that they had made some decisions on things or made some conditions that weren't reflected in the plan. They talked a lot about future proofing, like Kevin was saying, in case the time comes where they want to add solar panels, or if we demanded they added solar panels, they wouldn't have to go back to the DRB to get that approved. So there were some things like that, but the two things I think, the canopy trees and the interlocking pavers that they required, I think are in there. And Kevin's expanded on that too. As far as stormwater goes, we have a subdivision and land development code that I guess is in the process of being revised, but that has more than 10 pages on civil engineering analysis and calculations on how to calculate the 50-year event and how much you can have flow off. So all that has to be done when they build it, when they actually do the plans for it. Runoff has to be controlled, but there is concern about the trees getting enough water. And I think it was really useful and really important that Mary Pat was able to provide a lot of intelligent input on how that works. And I think it's made a difference. I think that part of the plan is better. And I think the trees will have a lot better chance of surviving. I like the fact that there's fewer driveways than there would be if these properties were individually developed. That provides more room for street trees, and they've added some street trees where those driveways were taken out. So I think the thing for me is just weighing the pros and cons and trying to imagine what would happen if this didn't go through. I don't see any way. I mean, it's zoned R4 and R7. Nobody's going to preserve those houses and try to turn them back into single family houses. We have a house a block away that's been on and off the market for 5 years through the Urbana Development Corporation. And nobody's biting on that, So people, I know it's hopeful, and I like some of those buildings. I hate it when we see old structures that were well built originally and still have character and everything. But this corridor was designated for this years and years ago, way before my time on the council. I mean, I don't know when the actual zoning for this was done. I guess maybe when they did the comp plan. So I'm leaning toward approving it. I know my neighbor's going to yell at me, but I don't know if it'll pass. But I hope people at least express what they think would come of this in an honest way if it's not approved.
Eric?
So I don't think our job here is to rubber stamp whatever vote happened at the design review board. We get to vote on this because we get a final say about whether the guidelines were really met or not met. And in this case, it's quite clear to me that the guidelines were not met. The goal of the Lincoln-Busey corridor is to provide a buffer and protect the R2 neighborhood that it's adjacent to. In any project of this size, where you've got a uniform design on 70% of a square block, is just not going to fit in with an R2 neighborhood that has an eclectic, old 1800s, early 1900s taste, architectural style. It is an eclectic style, but now you've got a monolith, and it is the largest development in this entire neighborhood, in this entire West Urbana neighborhood. And so there's no way something this large could fit in. If they had that one set of 3 buildings on Lincoln, could work. I don't like the architectural style, it could work. But to have the whole block that way, it changes forever the character of West Urbana, and it's not what the Lincoln-Busey corridor was trying to achieve. I have, if allowed, a small slide presentation I'd like to show about what, some photos actually of other buildings in the area of similar height and number of stories to show you the kinds of things that could have been. May I show that?
Sure.
Let's see if I can do this.
Why not?
Try to make a point, make it quick. All right. Here we go. So this is an example of a 3-story building here in Urbana on Green Street. It has nice brick, it has stone, it has balconies. It's the kind of thing we like to see. It fits in with the neighborhood pretty well. It has pitched roof. It doesn't stand out as an eyesore. It's smaller, but it could have been made bigger in a bigger spot. Here's one in Champaign with Art Deco features. It's a 4-story building in brick and masonry with Art Deco features. It's a new building. Can be done. It has underground parking. That also can be done in modern times. I've been told it's too expensive, can't be done. There's actually quite a few examples of this in Champaign. This is not some other country, it's not another state. This is a walking distance from our current site. Here's a very modern building, 3 stories. Not my taste personally, but it's very tasteful. It is authentic to itself. It's got a style. It fits. Here's another very modern one, 4 stories, completely different, but it makes a statement and it's on a street where it could work. Even that could work on Lincoln, perhaps. Here's a more traditional brick and stone, masonry, 3-story building, taking up a whole block. Not bad. Here's one, very interesting roof, 4 stories. Again, underground parking, interesting features, brick, skylights, takes up a whole block, still works. Here's one that's a little bigger, really impressive. This makes a statement. It can be done, can be done. So what's that purpose of the Lincoln-Busey corridor? It's to, its intent, ensure future growth is compatible with the existing built environment on the corridor, and to aid in that transition from the larger scale buildings of the university to the single family homes. And this project doesn't do that. Here is right from the Lincoln-Busey corridor, quoting the comprehensive plan. It's to preserve the uses now as they exist, precluding in future encroachment of higher density buildings into this unique residential area. And so, again, this isn't doing that. This is creating a really large structure that's going to dominate the architectural style and not mesh. So that's why I would vote no on this. Also, at the end of the day, this is a political process, and I think you've heard loud and clear that the neighborhood does not like this project as proposed. Now, what could come next? I would argue that in the future, a building of the style of some of the ones I just showed you could be put there. There could be a process that involves the community. And I would say to you, it's not just whether all the people agree. You're not going to get all the people to agree in the community. But the process itself has value of getting input from the community and taking them seriously. That really hasn't happened here much in Urbana, and it really needs to. Otherwise, we get into this loggerhead situation where no one feels that they've been considered who lives here. And remember, all these homeowners, they are the long-term investors of this neighborhood and of the city. So with that, I turn it back.
Any comments from folks who haven't spoken yet as discussion? Sharice or Jared? You're muted, Sharice.
I already said what I was thinking about.
Okay. Jared, did you have any comments to add?
I'm just really enjoying the debate, to be honest. Everybody's making some really good points on both sides of this argument. So I wanted to hear what Bill was going to have to say to Eric, because he had a response.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to realize that there's a lot of economic reality that was being ignored there with 4-story buildings. Not only economic reality, our FAR would have to be about 4 or 5 instead of 0.76 to allow something like that. The more development space you give somebody, the more they can do. Yeah, they could do underground parking if you give them a 4 or 5-story building. It's just pretty simple economics. So yeah, if you want bigger, high quality brick and steel, you're going to have to raise the density. I don't understand why that's such a hard thing for people to understand. I don't think that's what most of the neighbors want. I don't think they want those big buildings. I think what they were looking for is this type of density, but just in maybe broken up structures more, or structures that blended in a little bit more. When you look next door though at the Europa house and consider that that's actually closer to the neighborhood than this is, you know, that's much higher density. I don't find that building especially attractive. I don't find it ugly. The one on the north side, or the Busey, is not bad. But you know, it's higher density for sure, about the same height. So we have, you know, 35-foot height limits. All that stuff comes into play when people are designing this. So I wouldn't fault the developer for that. I'd fault, you know, the people that, I'd fault the city council, us, or people come before that put all those limits on there to make it hard and to really build anything there. We have the parking requirements, stormwater requirements. I don't know if Champaign has stormwater requirements, but no, they don't have parking requirements. We do. So all that comes into play, and I think the developers have really tried. And just for a little more perspective, the stormwater difference, I think they were saying it was 14,000, about 14,000 square feet, no, 7,000 square feet. What was it? I worked it out. I think it was 7,000 some additional square feet of impermeable surface compared to the existing. And we have the stormwater utility fee that bases your usage on the amount of impervious surface. I mean, the amount of the stormwater utility fee you pay is based on impervious surface. But for single family and duplex properties, they use an average. The average per single family property is 3,100 square feet. So the additional impervious surface on this development would be equivalent to about 2 1/3 single family homes. That's the additional impervious surface we're talking about adding there. The one that the impervious surface that people are getting so upset about that it's going to overflow our stormwater capacity. If we can't handle that kind of, and for one thing, we don't have to handle it because we have regulations that they'll have to handle a 50-year flood. So I think some of this is getting overblown, has gotten overblown. I saw some of the posts that went out that probably prompted 100 people to sign or click a button on a petition, whatever they had to do. And some of those weren't factual. So I wish that people would at least be factual so that I could have more confidence on the public input we get. And that's not just in this case, that's in things we've been dealing with for the past year, really. So that's, I guess that's my response to that.
Mary Alice.
I just wanted to address a couple of things that have been brought up. Bill, I agree with you. We should be using the criteria for the PUD in terms of whether or not we approve this. And that's why I read those goals from the comprehensive plan. Because we are supposed to be using the comprehensive plan in terms of whether or not this PUD fits that criteria. And, you know, aside from the over 100 signatures that we had from the neighborhood, we had multiple people emailing us, multiple people who gave us commentary today that it simply doesn't fit in the built fabric of the neighborhood. I mean, that's just as clear as can be. I mean, you can erase all the other things, but I think that what came out very clear in terms of everything that we've heard. The second thing that I wanted to bring up was the DRB. And I think you're right. I think we need to fix this process. I think that it is broken. And I agree with staff that it passed. Where I disagree with staff is that we had 7 conditions. And it was very interesting watching the DRB in that the discussion on the DRB with the chair and another member really felt that they were giving advice to City Council, that they were waiting for City Council to make the determination in terms of whether or not this fit the DRB guidelines. So now we've got this weird thing where DRB approves in our zoning ordinance, but the DRB board is saying, hey, City Council, why don't you approve it? And so I look at those conditions and I say, okay, well, they haven't met all the conditions. And so those are the 2 criteria that I'm using as this project. I'm looking at the comprehensive plan, and then I'm looking at the design review board process, which I totally agree is broken, but we have to look at where we are today with that. And where we are today with that is we have to say whether or not those conditions were met.
Bill Colbrook.
I guess I just want to respond to both Mary Alice and to Eric. Mary Alice, when you read those conditions for the corridor, you said that unequivocally those were not met. Well, I see it just the opposite. When you read those, I said, yep, met that one. Yep, met that one. Yep, met that one too. So I mean, I see it completely different. So it's not clear as day. I've got a different opinion than you, but I think this project, does fit the criteria for that corridor. And Eric, if I was going to give a PowerPoint presentation to make my point, I would have taken the same pictures and said, look at these buildings. These absolutely would not fit in that neighborhood because I think, in my opinion, the design that the developers are putting forth today is a much softer look. It's a much better transition from across the street to the west, to the university, to the east, and the residential area. Every single one of those buildings that you've shown were huge and 4 stories. And I mean, some of them, especially the first one, I really like that design, with the brick and the patios. But after that one, I would absolutely use every one of those examples in my case to say, see, this is exactly what you shouldn't put there. So, I mean, it's just amazing how we can look at exactly the same buildings and have difference of opinion, just like we're looking at this development. And clearly my opinion is different than some others on the council, but I'm going to go back to what we said. I believe they followed the rules. I think they've done what has been asked of them, and my vote's going to be a yes.
I'd like to clarify something here. I think we're kind of going in circles at this point, and I assume that people have made their minds up as far as how they're going to vote. But I wanted to clarify a couple of things. Number one, with regard to the conditions that were passed out of the design review board. And I've got these in Exhibit K, draft DRB minutes. The first condition was this: construction of the proposed building and parking area shall be in general conformance with the attached site plan elevations and architectural renderings in Exhibit C. Any significant deviation from these plans and renderings shall require consideration by the Design Review Board. That's standard coming out of them. That basically said they're going to build it pretty much the way they have it in their plans. Number 2, the stone masonry material may be substituted with another masonry material that is on the materials list in the approved design guidelines. That's a may. It's not a shall, it's a may. And in this case, they chose to substitute what they call the round rubble now with the rectangular rock. Number 3, either natural wood lap siding or wood sewn siding as listed in the materials list in the approved design guidelines be accepted as alternate materials to the proposed engineered wood siding. Reading that, it does not say shall, it says this is a possibility. This is another flexibility. Number 4, allow the footprint of the parking lot to be reduced in any areas where it could help preserve trees, taking into consideration a reduction in the number of parking spaces. The developer did reduce the number of parking spaces, I think by 5, to allow for more drainage for the trees. But again, it was the DRB giving the flexibility to do that. Number 5, permeable pavers shall be used in any area that is indicated as permeable pavement. Permeable pavers may be extended to any other areas of the parking lot. And the developer has agreed to try to maximize the amount of permeable pavement pending the engineering studies. Again, flexibility. 6, allow solar panels to be installed on the rooftop of the buildings. That gives them the flexibility to install solar panels in the future. Right now, they're going to make it solar ready. And number 7, canopy trees shall be added to the landscape plan of a diversity of tree species as appropriate, and look at the replacement value for trees being removed from the site in coordination with the city arborist. So of those 7 conditions, 2 of them were shall, and the rest were may or allow or basically give flexibility. So people stating that these developers did not meet the conditions set by the DRB are misinterpreting what was done and passed out of the DRB. And I'd like to make the point and emphasize this again. The city, the developer have complied and have followed the existing planning and zoning guidelines and documents that we have available to us. Those are the tools that we have to use. I agree the process needs to be fixed. It's one of many things that are outdated in this city and that we are systematically trying to address. We just can't do it all at once. But the comprehensive plan, which was adopted in 2005 based on input, gathered 20 years ago, basically, the Lincoln-Busey corridor guidelines, which were incorporated into the comp plan, and the zoning ordinance itself, all reflect a great deal of input from the community, and particularly from West Urbana, because I remember when all these things were done. I wasn't involved in the process, but I certainly remember hearing the input from the neighborhood, and it definitely reflects the values and the desires of the West Urbana neighborhood. But if you look at what the Busey corridor actually says, and the zoning that's in that corridor, and it's been pointed out, the PUD is located in a block within the Lincoln-Busey corridor. It's been recognized as a transitional area in the comprehensive plan. It was flat out said this is appropriate for higher density housing, and the developers have followed all our written guidelines, policies, and ordinances in this. And it's very upsetting to hear the public continually attack the developers and city staff and accuse them of violating the law. They're not. They followed exactly what the city told them to do. Whether you agree with it or not, or whether you think it has to be changed is a different story. But whether they followed our rules, yes, they did. The underlying zoning for the parcels that this PUD involves are either R4, again, that's medium density multifamily housing, or R7, that's university residential. This is also in zone 1 of the corridor, which is designated for higher intensity development than zone 2, which is just south of there. And it basically, and the Lincoln-Busey corridor guidelines also say, quote, it can be of a larger scale than those proposed in zone 2. And then our zoning ordinance says that a PUD has to go beyond, you know, if you're going to get a variance, you have to provide amenities. So I can also assure the public who, you know, it's been very frustrating to get some of the emails we've gotten over the past few days or listen to what people are saying, and over again hearing that the city doesn't listen to the community, the city doesn't value public input, or what we do doesn't reflect what the community wants. And I can assure you that it does. Just in my few years here as mayor, I have had the opportunity to see some proposals come floating past us that have never seen the light of day, because we knew that it didn't reflect what the community wanted. If something was too tall, too big, too massive, too dense, too many cars, too many people, they weren't entertained. You know, they weren't even brought. They were discouraged, and because they would have too much of an impact on the neighborhood. So that's done out of respect for the neighborhood and what the neighborhood deserves and wants. A couple of the more recent projects that have been proposed for this particular block, you all saw it. One was called The Collective. That was presented in 2019. That had a setback of anywhere from 6 to 10 feet. If you want to talk about massive, that was massive. 5.5 stories, 333 bedrooms, 105 parking spaces. It had an FAR of over 4.0, and 0 of the 29 trees on the land would have been preserved. 0. That, and then it had some commercial or retail activity. So that one didn't make it. Then there was another one, another PUD that was I guess a preliminary proposal that had setbacks of 15 to 20 feet. It was 3 stories. It was 104 bedrooms, 38 parking spaces, an FAR of 1.366, and it wanted to save 4 of the 29 trees. That one didn't make it. So you compare it to this current proposal, setbacks of 25 feet all around. The sidewalk is set back 19 feet from Lincoln Avenue. It varies from 2.5 to 3 stories tall, 70 bedrooms, which is about what you've got there now. I walked around the whole block yesterday, took pictures, etc., and looked at all the trees. There's a house there that has 14 bedrooms in it. It's in the R7 end of the block, 14 bedrooms in that house. Anyway, this is going to have 70 bedrooms, 44 parking spaces. So we're pulling cars off the street, which is a good thing in that particular block. It's got 4 EV parking spaces. It's wired to develop more if the demand increases, which is also a good thing. 76 bike parking spaces, FAR of 0.76. They're planning to preserve 24 of the 29 mature trees on the site. And I think people need to remember too is if you talk about tree preservation, a lot of the big trees on that site are on private property. And somebody could come along and say, oh, just get rid of all these trees tomorrow, and we would have nothing to say about it. There'd be no public oversight at all. So this PUD does give some public control over the trees on the site. And the buildings, again, are going to be solar ready. They did increase the energy efficiency of the building over above what's there now. And they are accessible or adaptable for persons with disability. That's also very important. They're safer because they're sprinkled for fire protections. I think it's a great idea not to have driveways on Lincoln Avenue. It's much safer to have the entrances off California Street. And they're going to do what they can to increase the permeable pavement on the interior of the project. So again, to say that we need to be factual here, has been pointed out. If you could talk about the mass of the building, you hate the design, you don't like the size of it, but to claim that people have violated the law and not followed the process and aren't giving anything as far as amenities for this project, it's just not true. And you know, you'll vote tonight. I agree the processes need to be changed. We're in the process of updating the comp plan. We need to rewrite the zoning ordinance. Frankly, that whoever put together the Lincoln-Busey corridor, you know, they almost went parcel by parcel, and that's crazy. So we need to redo that as well. And obviously that will involve a great deal of community input, but we're dealing with the laws, the ordinance, the processes that we have now, and that's what you need to be voting on. So, Bill Colbert, this is your motion.
Yeah, I want to make a motion to approve ordinance number 2020-12-070, an ordinance approving a preliminary development plan for plan unit development, 602 South Lincoln Avenue, CCH Development LLC and CMH Development LLC, plan case 2411 PUD 20, and the companion ordinance number 2020-12-071, an ordinance approving a final development plan for a plan unit development, 602 South Lincoln Avenue, CCH Development LLC and CMH Development LLC, plan case 2412 PUD 20.
You want to incorporate that amendment regarding the permeable pavers?
Yes. And that motion includes the amendment for the permeable pavers that the developers have agreed to do once they get involved in the project.
Excuse me, I think there was also discussion about changing the stone shape and potentially also about some tree swaps, and I wanted to make sure those are reflected if that is the desire.
So we can include, yes, the switch to stone, different stones that were offered, and was it trees, Lori?
Yeah, I suppose there was some discussion about some people didn't think some of the trees should be saved.
No, it was, I think Mary Alice wanted canopy trees instead of ornamental trees, but can you clarify, Mary Alice?
That's correct. On the north side, there were some ornamental trees, and I just wanted to see if they could be swapped out for canopy trees.
Okay, can we make that in consultation with the arborist, please, in case there's a reason? Thank you.
So does that motion stand good enough?
So it's the real original ordinance with the amendment on maximizing the permeable pavers on the site, switching
And then
to
the stone shape.
rectangular stone, and swapping out the ornamental trees for canopy trees if it is approved by the city arborist.
Yes, that's my motion.
Sharice, actually we had a motion on the floor. Sharice, you had seconded. Would you accept those changes?
Yes, I'll accept those changes.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Last chance for discussion. If there's anything more. Dennis.
The problem that we seem to be facing in this community is that all current development that we see in this town is substandard as far as design. The modern approach to putting together a building is to slap together a little bit of brick, a little bit of vertical siding, a little bit of horizontal siding, to ignore any kind of actual casement window treatment, or to replicate any previously historic design element, but to merely put together what could be a series of these look like student housing, or what one sees in modern residential suburban kinds of construction, where the cheap materials of the era, the plastic, sidings, whether they replicate wood or pretend to replicate wood, but of course never actually look like wood, flat, sort of like pseudo brick or masonite looking like surfaces that are painted. And we see these on the Gather, in the upper stories of the Gather construction going up right now at the corner of University and Lincoln. And deciding that we'll splash some color on the first floor that's different from the second floor. And if there's a window bay that butts out from the side of the building, that'll be a third color. And in the facade will have vertical lines instead of horizontal lines, just to be different. And so what we're getting is we're in an era of bad design without true hegemony or harmony. It's like a bad quilt. And I think that when we accept this as a standard that we're going to be enshrining along Lincoln and any other future development that's in the downtown area where we think that we want quality and we want to be proud of buildings, but what we're getting is generic, modern. I think that we're making a mistake in encouraging it. The developers here could go back. I mean, what we could do is hold this in council or send it to committee again and find out whether developers would like to reconsider the facade veneer. Would they like to engage a lot more brick into the building, or maybe this rectangular stone? The example that Eric Sachs showed us, the very first one, which is 701 West Green Street, a 3-story building that was completely clad in brick with balconies. It had an integral harmony, which was obvious and was not matched by the other buildings that he showed us. And I would agree with Will Colebrook that those are not good examples of modern architecture that we would like to emulate, because they also have rather hodgepodge and arbitrary features. But there are examples in the community that we should emulate and we should use in the Lincoln-Busey corridor. And the architect here just hasn't provided that. Well, I'm sorry to say.
Yeah, what we have before, we're approaching 10 o'clock, so I think we need to move ahead on this. But
well, those are my thoughts.
Okay, you have a motion on the floor. Bill Brown?
Just one final thing I thought of earlier, and I forgot to mention it. I think, a lot of times we're looking at buildings from the outside, but it's also useful to think of what it's like to live there, because those are our potential future Urbana residents who we represent. And I don't think in general, they would be willing to give up a lot of, efficiency of efficiency of their electrical. Boy, it's getting late already.
Energy efficiency.
Energy efficiency, thanks. And amenities inside, and having the trees to look at that would be saved with this project, so that they could have brick on the outside. I mean, I think there's a trade-off. They have a certain return they need on this investment, and if they don't do it here, they'll do it someplace else. It's not like they're going to be willing to accept less here because they have other options. That's just the way it is. So there's always a trade-off, and I think I would prefer that our potential future Urbana residents have those options, and also that we would be offering 1-bedroom units that would diversify the student population in this part of town.
Okay.
Or other professional.
I think I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Ms. Wu?
No.
Mr. Sachs?
No.
Ms. Hersey?
No.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
No.
Mr. Colebrook,
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
No.
That motion fails.
Maybe they'll come back to us, but maybe they won't. But certainly style is important.
Okay, we're moving on. Next up is ordinance number, I'm sorry, Bill, your last.
Yeah. Ordinance number 2021-01-003, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code, Chapter 12, Human Rights Ordinance, applicability to the city of Urbana. I've got in my notes, this was recommended for approval with the amendments as discussed in the email that was sent to us by I believe, Carol Mitten. So on behalf of the committee, I move for approval.
Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Carol, did you need to add anything?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Any discussion? Jared.
I just want to say quickly, I'm glad to see the language added into that section. I think it will do much to help us have a more clear, transparent process. And I still want to, encourage the city to consider bringing forth a proposal for the public to consider about the separation of these types of accountability bodies from the city itself. I know it would be a whole new endeavor for a city of our size to be considering doing something like that, but I still think it's well worth the topic of bringing it forward. But I do appreciate these changes, and I hope they will allow for a public review process of how the city deals with those things. Thanks.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu?
Yes.
Mr. Sachs?
Yes.
Ms. Hersey?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
That motion passes. Thank you, Bill. Next up are reports from special committees. I don't believe we have one. Reports of officers. Okay, new business. Items under new business. Ordinance number 2021-03-008, an ordinance approving major variances, duplex at 213 West Illinois Street.
Everyone. This is a request by Gary Apfelstadt for two major variances to allow a duplex at 213 West Illinois Street on a lot that is smaller than required by the zoning ordinance, with 2 parking spaces where 4 would normally be required. A third variance is requested to allow the applicant to rebuild his garage 4 feet from the property line in a required front yard. Staff received 2 letters of public input, both in favor of the variances, and they were included in your packet. And the Zoning Board of Appeals has recommended approval for all 3 variances. Staff concurs. This is a location map of the property. The lot is 50 feet wide, 5,775 square feet in area, which is 3.75% smaller and 16.67% more narrow than the minimum lot size requirements for a lot in the R2 zoning district. The existing garage encroaches into the required front yard along Cedar, 4 feet from the west property line, and has been on the property for over 100 years. It's deteriorating and needs to be replaced. This is a zoning map of the property and it's surrounded by R2 zoning. It's a corner lot, which has 15-foot required yards on both Illinois and Cedar Street. The first two, oh, sorry, this is a future land use map. The first 2 requested major variances would allow the existing duplex to remain as is on a substandard lot with fewer parking spaces than required by the zoning ordinance. The third request is for a major variance to allow the garage to be rebuilt in the required front yard 4 feet from the property line. The narrow lot width creates a practical difficulty in rebuilding the garage 15 feet from the property line or in providing additional parking. There's also a garden in the rear yard that the applicant would like to remain or keep there. This is just another photo of the home and the garage. To summarize, staff found that the application meets the requirements for the requested variances. The lot was platted to be smaller and more narrow than what is required. The lot size and configuration create a practical difficulty. The on-site parking has been sufficient for the duplex residents, and additional on-street parking is available for purchase if needed. The requested variances will not alter the size of the structure on the property in any way. The request is made to allow the existing duplex to continue and bring the property into conformity with the zoning ordinance. Staff also found that the application meets the requirements for the garage variance. The lot size and configuration create a practical difficulty in locating the garage 15 feet from the property line. The existing garage has been on the property for over 100 years, where it has not caused issues for the property owner or adjacent properties. The variance represents generally the minimum deviation from the zoning ordinance. Actually, I think that was changed since the last report. The ZBA had a discussion about potential safety issues for the garage located 4 feet from the sidewalk. Engineering weighed in on the proposed location of the garage, and we had discussion about installing a mirror or a window, but it would not achieve the desired range of vision. And reorienting the garage off the alley would not be much safer, as the drivers would have to, the turn radius off of the alley would be difficult as well, and there are pedestrians and bicyclists that would traverse the alley. And moving the garage further east would improve the range of vision, but it would result in the removal of the garden and significant paving of the rear yard. This is the garden in the backyard. And there are two separate ordinances for these cases. The City Council has the following options for the lot size and parking requirement variances: approve the ordinance with certain terms and conditions, or deny the ordinance. The same options apply to the garage variance, although it's a separate ordinance. And at the January 20th, 2021 meeting, the Zoning Board of Appeals voted with 5 A's and 0 nays to approve the conditional use permit for a duplex at 213 West Illinois Street, and to approve the 2 related major variances. At the February 18th, 2021 meeting, the ZBA voted with 4 A's and 1 nay to approve the major variance to allow the garage to be rebuilt in a required front yard 4 feet from the property line. Staff concurs, and I can answer any questions you have for staff, and Gary is also here to answer any questions for the applicant.
Any questions for Kat? Mary Alice.
So I know that there's a rule that if your building is destroyed by fire or some other natural event, more than 50%, that you have to build, you have to rebuild it based on the zoning. Would this ordinance overwrite that? So in other words, if you know, heaven forbid that the building burnt down completely, would they be allowed to rebuild as a duplex based on this ordinance?
So the conditional use permit would apply, I believe, for them to rebuild this structure as a duplex with that same conditional use permit. So
how long does the conditional use permit stay in effect? Is it in perpetuity?
Yes, unless revoked by, I believe, the city.
The idea there is that one wouldn't want to make an investment in a building if they didn't know they could have that use in perpetuity. So the difference is that it needs to stay in its current form. So they wouldn't be able to triple its size without getting it, you know, an additional approval. So that is, yeah, basically this would lock it in unless they wanted to do something you know, beyond typical maintenance. So
okay,
yes is the answer.
All right. Thank you.
Dennis.
Is this discussion for the first variance but not the second?
All 3 are considered together, but there are 2 separate ordinances within that.
So I want to ask about the discussion that was in the committee about the garage. It seems like it would be a good time, and I remember one of the commissioners said that this would be a good time to move the garage back to align with the setback of the street because it's going to be completely rebuilt. And so there is room in the backyard to do that efficiently. And it seems like the objection for doing it is because there's a blueberry bush or a blackberry bush in the way. And I'm just trying to understand why a blackberry bush would prohibit the correction of a setback that's inappropriate in that district. So do we have the option of requiring that the setback be honored and used? Because the garden can obviously be reconfigured in that there is space to the north of the garage, which is now grass. And if the occupants value the garden, they can reconfigure the garden and still have a garden. So is that something that the city council can correct at this time?
I'll take it, Kat. Yes, certainly council can deny the variance to have the garage be 4 feet from the property line. There might have been other things that were not mentioned, such as setting it back will result in more permeable, excuse me, it is late, isn't it, Bill? Impervious surface in order to build a longer driveway. So there are other things to think about that might also impact a decision why having it in its current location might be acceptable. But yes, you could deny the variance for that.
Thank you.
Eric?
Just a comment on Dennis's comment there. So if we force them to push that garage back, then there's going to just be more driveway and less garden. And it's a really narrow lot, so they don't have much garden to begin with. So we'd pretty much be selling them, you can't have much of a garden.
As I said, it would be, there's room that's grass to the north of the garage that could be plowed, cultivated. The fact that the garden runs one way today doesn't mean that it couldn't run a different way tomorrow.
Well, it'd just be less garden because you'd have to have more driveway.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's start with the first ordinance there, which is 2021-03008. Can we get a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve that ordinance.
And I'll second.
Second, or made by Dennis, seconded by Mary Alice. Any discussion on this item? Mary Alice.
I guess what I want to say is, this property has been here for 100 years, and there were not a lot of standards in terms of width and depth and so forth, and this one comes pretty dang close. And so I think that this person didn't create the situation. It's just the way that land was platted 100 years ago. So for that reason, I'm in approval of this.
That's the story of much of West Urbana, actually. It's a lot of narrow driveway, not a narrow lots there. All right. Any other comments germane to this particular item? Okay. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu?
Yes.
Mr. Sachs?
Yes.
Ms. Hersey?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
That motion passes. Next item is ordinance 2021-03-009, which is an ordinance approving a major variance, and that's the garage at 213 West Illinois Street. ZBA case number 2020 MAJ-09. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
Moved by Jared, seconded by Sharice. Discussion. Mary Alice.
Yeah, so I read through the ZBA notes in the discussion about this, and they had talked about changing the direction that the cars come out, the doors going facing the alley. So I actually drove over there today. I walked around. I have not a big SUV, but a mini size SUV, and I drove into that alley, and there's absolutely no way that you can face those doors going to the alley. There's just not enough room there, and there's actually parking just on the other side. So if somebody was parked there, you would just be trapped. I think my biggest concern with keeping, and well, let me also say that the garage is in desperate need. It's like tilting. So I'm very happy to hear that they're trying to replace it. My biggest concern is really with pedestrian safety. So it is right there. That is a walkway for people who are going to Leal. So I was hoping that Bill might be able to weigh in a little bit as the chair of the bicycle pedestrian committee, because that really is my only concern with the garage being rebuilt at the same location.
I think usually the main concern is if they have enough driveway to park in where they'd be hanging over the sidewalk. I don't think that's the case here, is there? Is it?
No, they park in the garage.
Yeah, so I don't think there'd be a major concern with the pedestrians.
Okay.
Dennis.
Well, I think this is a real opportunity to correct what is an anomaly as far as the placement of the garage against the sidewalk. Maybe it was not a big deal in the old days when the garage was built, but I mean, if we're going to have setbacks and we're going to enforce them and we want to preserve the general alignment of the buildings and structures along a street, this is a great time to make that correction. And, you know, it doesn't have to be a driveway that's led up to the garage with cement. It could be gravel, crushed gravel. That would be just as adequate.
I'm not sure crushed gravel is allowed these days.
Yeah, not new. Cannot be installed new for driveways.
Oh, that's interesting to know. Anyway, I think that I'm not sure that I think that a blackberry bush is a significant reason not to move the driveway to the appropriate place and to honor the setbacks in the community. When the garden can be reconfigured because there's a green grass between the house and the garage as it is, which certainly could be used for cultivation if they wish to.
Well, there's a motion on the floor for approval.
That's right.
Will the clerk please call the roll? Phyllis, are you there?
Oh, yeah, my computer did this, the laptop did this stupid stuff again, so it's just now back on. You ready?
Yes, please.
Okay. Ms. Wu?
No.
Mr. Sachs?
Yes.
Ms. Hersey?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
No.
Mr. Colebrook?
No.
Mr. Miller?
No.
That motion fails. Next item is ordinance number 2021-03-010, an ordinance approving a major variance, 1006 South Wabash Avenue. ZBA case number 2021 MAJ01.
More garage case for you guys. This is a request by Deborah Berthold for a major variance to allow a garage roof overhang to extend 6 inches into the required 18-inch setback from the south property line at 1006 South Wabash Avenue. The February 18th, 2021 meeting, the Zoning Board of Appeals voted unanimously to forward this case to City Council with a recommendation to approve. Staff concurs. This is a location map of the property. The existing garage roof encroaches 6 inches in the required 18-inch setback, 12 inches from the south property line, and has been on the property for over 50 years. The roof of the new garage would also encroach 6 inches in the required setback, and the garage wall will be 22 inches from the property line. The new garage will be rebuilt larger to include a workshop, which will be used to make stained glass and mosaics. This is a zoning map. The property is zoned R3, single and two family residential, and surrounded by R3 zoning. This is a site photo of the home and the garage. The request is for a major variance to allow the garage to be rebuilt 12 inches from the side property line. The narrow lot width creates a practical difficulty in rebuilding the garage 18 inches from the property line, and there is a tree in the rear yard that prohibits the garage from being built further north and east. The house also prohibits the garage from being built further north. The garage would be rebuilt longer to include the workspace, but the width would remain the same. Per building code, the exterior wall of the new garage will be required to be 1 hour fire resistance rated. These are the two garages. And this is a site plan. To summarize, staff found that the application meets the requirements of the requested variance. The added workshop space will be used to make stained glass and mosaics, which do not generate noise or cause a nuisance to the adjacent property. And here's an aerial of the site plan as well. The city council has the following options: approve the ordinance with certain terms and conditions, or deny the ordinance. And as I stated earlier, the ZBA voted with 5 ayes and 0 nays to forward this case to city council with a recommendation to approve the request with the condition that the garage generally conforms to the site plan in ordinance attachment A. Staff concurs, and I can answer any questions for staff.
Mary Alice.
Well, were there any letters? Did you receive any letters from the neighbors, especially the neighbor that it would be it would be over? No.
No letters of public input, although Deb has had significant conversations with her neighbor, who is also looking to do the same thing potentially in the future, rebuild her garage that close to the property line. And that one is 17 inches from the property line. So it's about 1 inch from that 18-inch requirement.
Would you mind putting up the side-by-side with the little gate next to it?
One second, I closed it prematurely. So the photo or the site plan? Which one?
The photo. So I was looking, down number 6. Yeah, so my question is the property line, who owns that little wood gate?
That is an excellent question, and the applicant is online and could probably answer that better than I could.
The wooden gate itself belongs to the neighbor, but the land between the garages is split.
Okay, and so would rebuilding this garage or extending it, would that impact that little gate there? I'm just curious.
We haven't even talked about that.
Okay, all right, all right, okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Could we get a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the ordinance.
I'll second.
Moved by Jared, seconded by Bill Brown. Further discussion? Dennis?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with this. It seems that not too much is being taken and more is being gained. I think that I was sort of surprised. I thought that actually looked like a pretty nice garage, good looking garage, and matched the house. So I sort of hope that I recommend that the future garage have similar qualities and not just become a metal can with a louver door in front. And good luck with the mosaic making in glass. I also have a kiln in my garage, which I haven't used in 15 years, but I appreciate that.
Okay, will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu?
Yes.
Mr. Sachs?
Yes.
Ms. Hersey?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Hersey, Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
That motion passes. Next up are mayoral, staff, board, or commission appointments, and there are 4 tonight, and I believe the new deputy fire chief, police lieutenant, city attorney. Can you turn on your videos so we can see you? Great. Wonderful. Okay. And I'll just go over the 4 for you. I'm very pleased to welcome our deputy fire chief, Mr. Damon Dade. And actually, as you remember, this is a brand new position in the city of Urbana, long overdue. So we're really thrilled to have Mr. Dade here. He's been in the fire service with the Quincy Fire Department for over 21 years, 11 years of experience as a company officer. In January of 2020, he was promoted to Deputy Chief of Administration, just in time for the pandemic to roll into town. In that role, he created the Quincy Fire Department's COVID-19 policies, formed a joint task force to address civil unrest response, and implemented the department's annual training schedule. He served as president of MABUS Division 44. He's currently a member of the Governor's Firefighting Medal of Honor Committee. He's also a field staff instructor for the Illinois Fire Service Institute at the University of Illinois. He holds an associate's degree in applied fire science from John Woods College. And I will say that the city council received copies of the vita for these 3 employees. Police lieutenant, my appointment for police lieutenant is James Corey Coker. Corey Coker has served as a police officer with the city of Urbana for almost 21 years, beginning in June of 2000. He worked as a patrol officer until November 2004, at which time he began his service as a detective and school resource officer. In 2006, he moved into the position of field training officer, where he trained recruit officers in policy, procedure, criminal, and traffic law. He was promoted to the rank of sergeant in March of 2012, which is the position he currently holds. He supervises the day shift, manages rosters, briefings, and trainings, assists in the preparation of the departmental budget. He serves as the crisis intervention team coordinator and conflict management instructor. In 2014, he received a life-saving award, and in 2017, he received the Heroism Award. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in criminal justice from McMurray College, has served as an adjunct instructor in advanced verbal defense and influence at the U of I PTI, Police Training Institute, since 2015. And I will add to the public comment that you received tonight, we did get 5 letters of support for Sergeant Coker's promotion, including communication from the Central Illinois Mosque and Islamic Center, from the City of Champaign, Mayor Finan, from the Police Training Institute, and 2 members of the public, Molly and Randy Pankow, and Vic Anand, all in support of this appointment. I also would like to appoint David Wesner of Evans, Froelich, Beth, and Chamley as city attorney. I will point out that Mr. Wesner is not a city employee. We are contracting with him as an attorney from this firm for the time being. So he will not be a city employee. Dave Wesner has over 25 years of legal experience representing various cities and local governments in all aspects of government and affairs. His areas of expertise include advising elected and appointed officers and staff, drafting ordinances and resolutions, drafting and reviewing contracts and agreements, advising on matters involving the Freedom of Information Act and Open Meetings Act, collective bargaining, personnel matters, prosecuting municipal ordinance violations, collection of delinquent accounts, reviewing contracts and other documents, and conducting administrative hearings and real estate matters. Dave currently practices at Evans, is it Froelich or Froelich?
It's Froelich.
Froelich. Beth and Chamley, and he's worked for the City of Danville as Corporation Counsel and head of their legal department from 2008 through 2019. And then the fourth appointment is for the Plan Commission for a term ending June 30th, 2022, Deborah McFarland. Deborah McFarland is a multi-decade resident of Urbana and is founder and CEO of Dream Girls Academy, which is a locally based nonprofit organization aimed at providing leadership and structure for females in 6th grade and above to become positive and responsible women. She's on the executive board of the NAACP of Champaign County, serves on the program planning team of Urbana Park District. Deborah lives in the neighborhood where she grew up and hopes to help bring life and opportunity back to the Dr. Ellis Drive neighborhood. I would appreciate a motion for approval. Jared?
Before we do that, I'd like to make a motion to extend the meeting to 10:45.
Oh, thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Sachs,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook,
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
That motion passes.
Madam Chair, I have another motion, if I could be recognized.
Jared?
So we've, I've asked this numerous times, and I'm going to ask it again, though I don't know if anyone on council will support it, but I would like to make a motion to divide the question on these appointments, specifically to consider the deputy fire chief and the appointments to the plan commission to be considered separately from the city attorney appointments and the police lieutenant appointments, neither of which to be considered together, but to be considered separately themselves. That would be 3 separate votes rather than 1 on all 4 appointments. I believe that the varying differences between each one of these jobs deserve individual consideration and individual voting rather than voting on all of them at once. So if anyone's willing to second it and we could have a vote, I would greatly appreciate it. But if no one else feels that that's worthwhile, I understand.
I'd like to second that. Dennis Roberts.
Yes, question.
Mary Alice?
I just want to understand. So Jared, are you saying that deputy fire chief and the plan commission would be 1 vote, and then the police lieutenant would be 1 vote, and city attorney would be 1 vote? Is that
That's
how you're
correct.
Okay,
Yeah,
all
that's
right, got
correct.
it.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Sachs,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook,
No.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
That motion passes. So per that motion, may we have a motion to approve the deputy fire chief and the plan commission appointees? Mary
I'm
Alice?
happy to make that motion. I move that we approve the deputy fire chief, Denman Dade, and the plan commission for Deborah McFarland, term ending June 30th, 2022.
I'll second it.
Moved by Mary Alice, seconded by Bill Colebrook. Any discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Sachs,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook,
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
That motion passes. Deputy Chief Dade, would you like to say anything?
Yes, ma'am. First of all, I'll say good evening to the mayor and the council, all the citizens who are still with us. First and foremost, I'd like to give honor to God who makes all things possible. I'm super excited about getting to join the already wonderful Urbana Fire Department. And not only the department, but looking forward to working with everybody else in the community, the citizens, business owners, everyone who makes this city go, all the other city the agencies throughout the city, When you look at fire service in any city that you go to, we all share the same mission, and that is to protect our citizens, to reduce the loss of life and property. But we also share similar, if not the same, hurdles and obstacles. And in order to do that, we have to foster relationships with everyone in order to make sure that we support the training efforts of all of the firefighters that you have here in this wonderful city of, you have a good progressive city and progressive fire department. So I'm looking forward to fostering those relationships so that we can help the men and women on the Urbana Fire Department move forward with fulfilling that mission and protecting the citizens from whatever hazards would encroach upon the city. So I appreciate your vote, and that's all. So
Thank you, and thank you for staying with us so long and so late. And welcome to the city of Urbana.
All right.
All right, thank you much. We'll move on to Police Lieutenant James Corey Coker. Is there a motion?
I would like to, ma'am.
Bill Colbrick.
I'd like to make a motion to approve James Corey Coker to Police Lieutenant for the Urbana Police Department.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Discussion. Jared.
Well, I got to say, I'm glad to see that we got some folks who are up for appointments with us tonight. That's great to be able to talk to folks a little bit before these things get considered. It's super late, so I don't really know how much time we're gonna be able to have conversation with folks, but I hope we can get something meaningful in the time that we have. Sergeant Coker, you're familiar with all of us. We're familiar with you. I believe we've all met. I don't know that anyone on council hasn't met you. Maybe Eric, since he's new enough, but we've all talked to you. Obviously, you have been involved in a couple of controversial issues over the last year and a half or so, and we've largely not heard anything from our Urbana police officers with regard to the arrest of Alea Lewis. There was also recently the video with you making a joke about a bystander who came up and was wondering what you were doing, and that you were bothered by the fact that he asked you what you were doing, and so he was interested in what was happening on the public streets with Urbana police officers. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts on both of those cases in consideration of your promotion.
I will intercede here. The Alea Lewis case is still an ongoing criminal case, and we can't comment on that publicly. So for this appointment, you need to...
You cannot, you choose not to comment on it. It's not a cannot.
We do not comment on ongoing cases.
That's not correct, Jared.
Under what statute that says that you cannot comment? What law says that?
We are public officials, and there's an ongoing criminal case, and in order for the defendant to get a fair trial among her peers, we will not comment on an active criminal case.
That's not a law.
So if you have questions regarding education, experience, 22 years with the Urbana Police Department, anything else, feel free to ask. But that particular case, no.
Well, what about the other incident with the comments of the gentleman who was observing? I don't believe there's any criminal case ongoing with that one.
Thank you for having me, Mr. Miller. In regards to that situation, I think as all officers are humans, we sometimes lament sometimes. I did see an individual who was walking by who was curious. He grabbed my attention simply because he had circled us a few times. So obviously when we were dealing with two young men at the time on a complaint, I wanted to make sure initially that he was not going to be a threat or that he was not involved with anything that we were doing at the time. So yes, I did lament and I mentioned something about, I don't know what he was wondering about what we were doing. And I did lament to another officer exactly what happened on the video.
Okay, well, I mean, I guess, it just comes back to, what are we supposed to, do you regret that you did it? Should you have acted differently? I mean, what are we supposed to go? Yes, you admit that you did it. Obviously, everybody's seen the video that you did it, but how do you feel about it now that it's out in the public? Do you have any other thoughts about it other than, yeah, I did it?
I don't think that situation will define my career, nor that does it define my person or my character. It was a moment where I got caught doing something, which is a human nature. That's what I feel about that.
And I understand. I mean, we all, I've said things that I regret. I've certainly disrespected people. I'm far from a perfect person, so I understand that. I guess the only, and I won't press it any further than this. I guess the only thing I would say is that we, I think, expect, especially people in positions of leadership within police departments, to be held to a higher standard. Or I shouldn't say a higher standard, a high standard, a very high standard. And to casually put off somebody who's just concerned about the safety of their fellow residents, I don't know. It's the character flaw in it without expressing, I don't know, something that brings, I don't know, some semblance of remorse, or we need to be better than that. And I've learned from that. And I'm just curious if there's any inkling of that from that experience.
Well, I definitely will do my best to improve from this point. Obviously, I know that this position carries a large weight, and I'm willing to take under my duties and take care of my officers, and also address any problems that the city may have or citizens may have in regards to police services or calls for service. But I hope to earn your trust back, Mr. Miller.
Any other questions for Mr. Coker? Sergeant Coker. Okay, will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Sachs,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
I'm going to say yes, and
Ms. Hersey,
I'm saying yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
I'm going to pass.
Mr. Colebrook,
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
No, not at this time.
Okay, I'm going to go back because the thing froze and I didn't get a vote from Ms. Hersey, Mr. Brown. Ms. Hersey?
Yes. And I also wanted to just add to my yes is that I don't think a person is defined by, or should be defined necessarily by, after 20 years of service. Their one mistake or their one, I know I've said things that I regret saying sometimes. And so I've been in that hot seat. And yes, I think that Officer Coker has shown that he's capable of being a lieutenant.
Okay, Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So that's 5 yeses, 1 abstention, and 1 no. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And the last would be a motion for appointing David Wessner for city attorney.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Was that, I didn't get the second.
Me or Sharice, either one.
Let's go with Sharice.
Okay.
Sorry, Bill. Mary Alice.
So I wanted to know, this is the city attorney, which currently is Jim Simon, correct? I'm trying to figure out, we lost 2 attorneys, Kurt and Jim, and so this one only replaces 1. Is that right? And this would be a full-time position.
Well, it's on an how would you describe it, Carol? As needed basis.
As needed basis.
As needed basis.
And Dave's availability has been more than sufficient to meet our needs up to this point.
So approximately, what is that? Is it like 25, 50, 75? What percentage of time is that usually?
You mean relative to full-time?
I'm sorry?
Do you mean relative to full-time?
Yes, sorry.
I have to go back and look at I mean, I have to say, Dave is very efficient in the responses that he gives. So, he's billing us by, the portions of an hour. So I think we're getting, considering that, we're paying an outside attorney, we're getting very good value for our money. Dave is very efficient. So to equate it to like a full-time position is a little bit hard. I'm more than happy to report back to you what his billing has been for the past couple months, if that would help put it in context.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to change my vote, but I would be interested to know.
Yeah.
Okay. And then does the city have plans to open up a position, or are we going to kind of try this out and see how it goes? That's a question to you, Diane.
This is the interim plan.
This is the interim plan.
Yeah. And we do need to have a city attorney named, which is why we're making this appointment. So,
okay. All right.
And I will say that it's not unusual for municipalities to use this model rather than having multiple in-house attorneys too. So.
Okay.
Dennis?
Thank you. The only thing that I was curious about in this appointment was whether Mr. Wesner has represented Carl Foundation Hospital.
I have not.
That's lucky. Thank you.
Okay, Jared.
I don't know if 3 minutes is an appropriate amount of time because it's I only motion until 10:45. I don't know how much Bill's got in his BPAC presentation or if he even wants to make it tonight, but I can either, he's shaking his head no. Okay, well then I know what I would wish to do, just to extend the meeting by 5 more minutes to 10:50.
I'll second.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Sachs,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook,
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Motion passes. We're extended to 10:50. Jared.
Question for Mr. Wesner, if I may.
Sure.
Thanks for joining us. Thanks for sticking around so late to be a part of the meeting. I got just a philosophical quickie for you, 5 minutes, to see what where your position is at. I spoke with our previous city attorney about this issue on numerous occasions, and I'm curious on what your stance is. We've had a lot of controversial issues surrounding how we handle FOIA, how we handle OMA, and how we handle the public disclosure, basically, of information that pertains to the city when there is a possible lawsuit in consideration, or the potential threat of one, even if there isn't a real one that has manifested as of yet. I'm curious as to what your thoughts are on, obviously there's in private practice, to me, there's a big difference between, if you're facing a potential lawsuit with private entities, private individuals, I think the question is, that there is no question about how you go about forming a defense for those people. However, municipalities are public bodies and subject to, not necessarily different rules per se, but a different arena than a lot of others are. And you obviously have experience in Decatur, Danville. In Danville. So you have some knowledge of this. There have been numerous instances where I feel like the costs that the city has borne of choosing to take a position of silence, of refusal to admit wrongdoing in order to protect themselves during a potential lawsuit has often outweighed what probably could have been resolved if they had done so, because they ended up having a lawsuit against them anyway, when if an admittance of wrongdoing had been done and amends had made to be met, the issue might have been resolved and nothing would have come of that. If you're faced with a similar situation where someone has brought a lawsuit that has public knowledge and it's in the public arena, and there is a willingness of the charging party to accept, an apology of some sort, a public admittance of wrongdoing in exchange for dropping the lawsuit, where would you fall into how you would approach that situation?
Yeah, certainly appreciate the question. I guess I'll ask for a clarification, because you obviously commented about FOIA at the beginning. And the way I kind of took the question, maybe twofold, is perhaps my philosophy about FOIA in and of itself, and then secondarily more so driven by the idea if there's an active lawsuit. Frankly, I think potentially the answer to the question is not necessarily driven by whether it's active, but also probably similar in nature to whether it's probably on its way, in terms of how the city is going to position itself with regard to those. Is that kind of accurate? Do you want me to address kind of FOIA in a sense first, or is it really your question more so toward just me kind of commenting about lawsuits against the city?
I think both perspectives are good, but we only have 4 minutes, so. I
understood, and I'll try and be brief, although sometimes it's difficult for attorneys like preachers to be brief, when you let them talk. FOIA, my perspective is it's all about compliance. The exemptions are listed in FOIA for a particular reason. There's solid basis for those, and I think it's more of once you evaluate the situation under what those exemptions are, is whether or not they apply. And if you believe that they apply, then you apply them, and then you kind of take that as it comes, so to speak. I operate with the ideas that case law and the statute are driven to the idea of being open and transparent. But as I said, those exemptions are actually in there for a reason. There's solid reasons for them and for municipalities to use them, with respect to those situations. And so, again, people have differences of opinions about, how those really should be treated and whether or not you should exercise those or not. But, again, it's, I think, important to evaluate those given what the circumstances are, just to ensure, as obviously potentially the attorney for the city, is understand the dynamic of the idea of being open and transparent, but also you have to face that with the protection of the city itself as well, with regard to, what may come about from you taking a particular position or opinion. So it does kind of tail into your general question about lawsuits against the city.
We've got about a minute and a half.
Sure. Understand the perspective about, the concepts. My point is driven for protection of the city, and I get that there's a debate that will be ongoing all the time about whether you should really take that position or not. If an individual is willing to accept a public apology and drop the lawsuit, I get that. I would still be cautious, because if for some reason you do that and you make public comments and then they decide not to drop the lawsuit, those public comments are now going to come into play during that lawsuit, and now you've lost the ability to try and offer the circumstances and situations that your witnesses are going to testify in court. So I'm cautious of litigating in the public, if you will, just because my responsibility is to the city, and that's kind of first and foremost.
Okay, we need, is someone willing to, we have a motion on the floor and a second. Can the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Sachs,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook,
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes,
Mr. Miller.
Yes, I gotta be the stick in the mud and say no. No, sorry. Thanks, Dave, for the conversation on it.
That motion passes. It's 10:50 p.m. with no, Bill, can we,
Yeah, we can wait.
okay. We'll move items 5 and 6 to either the next committee meeting or council meeting.
And I think we also need to congratulate Mr. Wesner and Lieutenant Coker on their appointments as well before the end
I
of the
think
meeting.
you're right.
So welcome.
Congratulations. Thank you for your service, and we look forward to continued work with you all.
Thank you. Same
Thank you
here.
all for staying up so late. With no further business before this council, this meeting is adjourned.